Chapter 2071. Nan Xiaonan suddenly felt insecure. Maybe it was because the boss went out and left her and Miss Maid alone in the Rose Mansion. Most importantly, it was hard to figure out Miss Maid's thoughts. Of course, the boss's thoughts were also hard to figure out. However, the boss seemed to be easier to get along with. People still had to rely on themselves. Therefore, she came to the kitchen alone to look for the legendary kitchen utensils. Then, she would use star creation on all of them to increase the number of combat units on her side. Needless to say, the kitchen utensils in the Rose Mansion's kitchen were quite complete. There were as many as 7 kitchen knives. Things like Xing Chuang's kitchen knife. Nan Xiaonan had long been familiar with it. She seemed to have a kitchen knife in Xing Chuang not long ago. Then, Nan Xiaonan suddenly discovered a very serious problem. Her star creation spell actually failed. No, it actually failed. What happened? I didn't feel like I was sealed. Everything was fine when I cast the spell. Why? Nan Xiaonan looked at the unresponsive kitchen knives with a solemn expression. Failed. This star creation technique was Nan Xiaonan's biggest reliance, and it was also a unique technique. Although this, which from the other world's academic school was shameless, because of the star creation technique, she actually had a hidden arrogance in her heart. However, Nan Xiaonan didn't panic too much, because she thought of the city governor Durand, who suddenly lost his mind. Durand seemed to have a mental breakdown because he couldn't pray. Durand couldn't pray. So could Laval and Assaix. Then, her star creation spell failed because of the same reason. This mysterious transfer incident? Nan Xiaonan carried the kitchen knives back to the lobby with a heavy heart. The maid, Kate Air Lily, was holding a broom and sitting nervously beside the 2 patients. In front of the counter, not far away, Miss Maid had already placed a pair of strange bottles on the counter. When and where did he find this thing? Nan Xiaonan put the 2 kitchen knives behind her waist and tied them with her trousers. She came to the servant girl in a relaxed manner. Why is there even a test tube? Was it really possible to find such a thing in Rose Mansion? Wasn't it too much to ask for a microscope? Miss Yi, I just realized that my star creation technique has also failed. This place is very strange. Nan Xiaonan thought for a moment. Miss Maid nodded and said casually, this place has its own unique rules. Anything that is not recognized by the rules will not work. So how did you get your microscope? Are we no longer in the Holy Light Kingdom? Nan Xiaonan asked after some thought. You could say that, but you could also say otherwise. The servant girl was expressionless. She lifted the test tube and shook it. Lady Nan, are you worried about your own safety? Nan Xiaonan said with an apologetic smile. I'm worried about the boss. After all, he went out alone. Assaix and Laval look somewhat unreliable. That's true. Miss Maid suddenly fell into deep thought. Nan Xiaonan took the opportunity to say, Miss Yi, you also think so, right? Miss Maid heaved a sigh and said worriedly, it's already noon. I don't know if the master has eaten well. Sigh, what the F asterisk CK? You're actually worried about this kind of thing? Nan Xiaonan shook her head. She turned her gaze and saw the rusty iron sword that Miss Maid had casually thrown to the side. She had taken this thing from Arthashis, and the reason was that she wanted to keep it with her. But this thing looked like a type that would break anything casually. It was so rusty that it even felt like it would break when picked up. Nan Xiaonan frowned and picked up the iron sword. This thing didn't even have a scabbard. Is this sword really used by the sage? Since Mr. Assaix said so, it should be true. Miss Maid smiled slightly. This sword looks really ordinary. Nan Xiaonan shook her head. Anyway, she didn't see anything special about it. Okay. At this moment, Miss Maid suddenly poured the solution in the 2 test tubes together. After stirring it a few times with a glass rod, she pushed it out. Let Ludic and the others drink this potion. It should wake them up. Nan Xiaonan couldn't help but be stunned. So where did you get this set of tools? In the end, Nan Xiaonan was still a little confused and sent the potion to the 2 patients. After convincing Kate Air Lily, she began to feed Ludic and the mayor's male assistant. Speaking of which, what's the name of the male assistant? You don't know? In front of Orion's hut at the edge of the forest. The girl didn't tell a long story about the demon's sword and the demon. It was said that 1,000 years ago, there was an evil witch. this which liked to dig out the hearts of pure men and women. This was the source of the witch's powerful strength. Later, a hero appeared on the earth. The hero used the divine sword obtained from the lake elf and successfully killed the witch. However, before the witch died, she also cursed the hero. Since then, the divine sword became the demon's sword, and the hero became the demon who liked to dig out the hearts of pure men and women because of the curse. The lake in the forest was the final battlefield between the hero and the witch. Well, the dragon slayer eventually became the evil dragon. I understand this. After listening to the story, Asake shrugged, but why do all the similar stories start from 1,000 years ago? The girl looked at Mr. Asakes with an expressionless face. This made Asakes start to doubt himself again. Did he say something wrong that made people think that his intelligence was not developed properly? You think I didn't ask? The legend of the demon's sword in the lake has been passed down from the village. At this time, the girl said indifferently, "No matter who you ask in the village, they can only tell you this. After all, legends are only legends." Miss Jenna, you often hunt in the forest. Have you encountered this legendary lake? Boss Luo asked curiously. The girl shook her head. I haven't encountered it. Legend says that this lake only appears at midnight. Usually at this time, I'll be at home. Well, if you're full, get ready. I'll take you into the village. After saying that, the girl walked into the hunter's hut alone and locked the door. They were puzzled by the girl's actions. But not long after, the girl walked out of the hunter's hut again. The girl who walked out had changed into a light yellow dress and even put on a long wig. The slight wildness in her skinny body had disappeared. At this time, the girl gave people the feeling that she was a little lady who had been carefully cultivated. You? Mr. Asakes could not help but open his mouth. The girl said indifferently, "It's nothing. It's just that my family likes me like this. I don't want to disappoint them. That's all. Let's go." After leaving the forest, the village where the girl lived was not far away. After about half an hour of travel, they could vaguely see some scattered mud houses. The girl said that her family ran a farm and could be considered to be one of the wealthier families in the village. Asakes and Levi did not find it strange. An overly ordinary family would not be able to raise such a lady's temperament. After you enter the village, if anyone asks about me, don't mention what happened in the forest. Then what should we say? Levi thought for a while and asked. To say that you were attacked by the Burgundians when you were passing through their territory. The girl thought for a while and said, the people in the village generally hate the Burgundians. If you say that, you will gain some goodwill and sympathy. Levi frowned. The Burgundians' territory? There was no such thing as territory in the Holy Light Kingdom. They were all divided into 7 administrative units. The girl's words made Levi doubt if he was still in the Holy Light Kingdom. Is there a problem? The girl glanced at Levi suspiciously. This little girl is really on her guard. Mr. Asake saw this and quickly said, Nothing. There's really no problem. It's just that we don't look like we were attacked. Yes, that's true. The girl nodded seriously and pointed at the mud on the ground. You can make it look like you were attacked. Mr. Asakes could not help but open his mouth. He had a feeling that he had fallen into a trap. Why do I feel that this girl is doing it on purpose? Mr. Asakes could not help but laugh bitterly. She's so young, but she's full of evil tricks. What are you muttering about? The girl suddenly asked. Nothing. Mr. Asakes smiled casually and used his fingers to wipe off some mud and dust. Then he wiped his face a few times. Levi saw this and shook his head. He began to make himself look more haggard and also patted some mud on his body. Boss Luo had an interesting expression as he wiped his hands and then patted his face lightly. It felt like he was touching face cream. Wait, you don't need to. The girl suddenly frowned. She took out a handkerchief and walked to Boss Luo. She passed the handkerchief to him. You wipe it clean. They just need to dirty it a little. Boss Luo could not help but open his mouth and wanted to say something. Mr. Asakes could not take it anymore. Miss, why is the difference between people so big? Isn't everyone born equal? Because he looks better when he's clean. The girl said calmly, he's very suitable to be clean. At this moment, Even Levi could not take it anymore and sighed heavily. The girl continued, "The Burgundians will not attack randomly. However, if it's a noble from a merchant guild or a hostile force, then it's a different story. If you want to gain the trust of the villagers, then it's more reasonable for you to appear as a merchant or a noble. Among all of you, only this guy looks like a noble young master. Usually, if he's a noble young master, even if he's escaping, he will pay more attention to his image. He could be down and out, but he can't be sloppy." Mr. Assakes and Levi were stunned when they heard this. Mr. Assakes was even stunned. "I even feel that you make a lot of sense. I can't even refute it. Then what do I look like?" The girl thought for a moment and said, "You look like one of those middle-aged, useless mercenaries." "You just said useless, right?" Mr. Sash's face twitched. He frantically hinted that he should not argue with the girl. "I didn't." The girl shook her head. Seeing this, Boss Luo said, "How about this? I'm not a noble young master. Mr. Assakes and I are the same. We're just mercenaries. As for our missing comrade, he's our noble young master. What do you think?" The girl lowered her head and thought for a moment. "That's fine too. If you're looking for the missing noble young master, the villagers won't be surprised if you put in more effort. That's it." Boss Luo smiled and passed the handkerchief back to the girl. The girl said calmly, "It's dirty. You can take it. I don't want it anymore." Then, without waiting for Boss Luo to reply, the girl turned around and walked in front of the group. Assakes came to Boss Luo's side and sighed. He used to be young too. He used to be as handsome as Ludic in the capital of Freedom Academy, and often received handkerchiefs from girls. "I'm starting to feel that this isn't any of the 7 capitals. It's possible that we're not in the Holy Light Kingdom anymore," Levi said. Assakes frowned. "You mean the so-called nobles? No matter if it's a territory or a noble." Lavar said with a serious expression, "These things don't exist anywhere in the Holy Light Kingdom. They are only a type of knowledge that only exists in books." Assakes said, "I didn't work much when I was in school, but I heard some things about nobles from my teacher when I was traveling." Boss Luo asked curiously, "You too? Don't you know what nobles are?" Assakes shook his head and said, "It's not that we don't know. We know what nobles are, but we never talked about it. We're born equal. Therefore, everyone is equal in the Holy Light Kingdom. Nobles don't exist." Levi also had an attitude of deep agreement. Boss Luo said, "That's strange. Since it doesn't exist, how do you know?" Levi said, "I said, it appeared in books as knowledge." Boss Luo said, "If it didn't appear, how did the books record it? Since it's a kind of knowledge, at least it appeared before, right?" This, Arthashes subconsciously opened his mouth and then fell into a state of silence. He even looked at Laval and noticed that Laval was also frowning and not saying a word. At this moment, Arthashes was sure that Laval had probably never thought about this problem, just like himself. Since it didn't exist in the Holy Light Kingdom, why would it appear in books as knowledge? What was more incredible was that he seemed to accept this knowledge easily. "I feel that the reason why I can accept this knowledge is not because of learning, but a sense of déjà vu," Mr. Assakes said suddenly. "Let's put this question aside first." Levi shook his head and said softly, "We're here." At this moment, not only could they see the young girl Jahan, but they could also see the villagers weeding in the fields beside them. The young girl was greeting the villagers she met on the way as if she was a different person. Chapter 2072. The name of the clinic was simple. It was called Hank's Clinic. The medical system in the Holy City was very developed, and the city hall supported people's birth, aging, sickness, and death. Therefore, there was no such thing as being looked down upon. However, this didn't mean that small clinics couldn't survive. It was very convenient since it only took a few steps to get to the clinic. Moreover, even private clinics were covered by the medical system. Therefore, if it was just a simple cold, wouldn't a small clinic be better? Good. Therefore, when Hank's Clinic opened, many patients came to register. However, most of them were residents nearby, and most of them were old people and children. This Dr. Hank seems to be very popular. In front of the clinic, the white-clothed young man and the 2 high-level angels were sizing each other up. Soon, the white-clothed young man walked into the clinic. "Hello. Are you here to see a patient? Please register first," the young nurse at the front desk said with a smile. The white-clothed young man walked in as if he didn't hear her. The young nurse at the front desk was about to stop him, but the female angel who followed the white-clothed young man stepped forward and extended her hand in front of the young nurse. Then, she said calmly, "We can go in." "Yes, you can go in." The young nurse absent-mindedly repeated the female angel's words, and then slowly sat down. "Who are you? Are you the next patient? I'm sorry, but I haven't finished seeing this patient yet. Can you please wait outside for a moment?" Dr. Hank looked at the three people who pushed open the door and entered in surprise. At this moment, he was checking the symptoms of a fever for a child, and the child's mother also looked at the three people who pushed open the door and entered in surprise. At this moment, Angel Londo made a move and made the mother and the child stand aside silently. The child and the child's mother instantly became motionless like statues. Who are you?" Dr. Hank turned pale with fright. This sudden turn of events was too weird. At this moment, the white-clothed young man pulled out a chair and sat down in front of Dr. Hank. His eyes were as sharp as swords, and Dr. Hank's face instantly turned pale. "Do you know this person?" The white-clothed young man opened his hand. A phantom of a small person appeared in his palm. This phantom of a small person looked like the drunkard who died of spontaneous combustion. I don't know him." Dr. Hank took a deep breath and looked calm. The young man in white said indifferently, "This person just passed away not long ago. The cause of death was that his body suddenly combusted, and in the end, his body became a charcoal." "How could this be?" Dr. Hank opened his mouth in surprise, then shook his head. "So, what does this have to do with me?" The female angel said, "Before this person died, he came to see you and took a medicine that you prescribed, a medicine that can make people happy." "Dr. Hank, do you remember anything? Are you kidding me?" Dr. Hank shook his head. "How could there be such a drug?" The female angel said, "We need an answer. It would be best if you can be honest with us. Otherwise, we can only open your destiny system and look at your daily log." "What?" Dr. Hank looked at the three people in front of him in disbelief. "Do you think you're saints? Don't waste time on him," the white-robed young man said calmly. The female angel nodded and then walked to Dr. Hank. She pressed her hand on Dr. Hank's forehead. In an instant, under Dr. Hank's horrified gaze, his destiny system uncontrollably opened. Even the diary that recorded his daily life uncontrollably opened in front of others. "You can't do this. This is my most private matter. I didn't commit a crime, and I wasn't convicted. You don't have the right to do this." The log recorded everything that happened to everyone in the Holy Light Kingdom from birth. Not only what he experienced, but even his inner thoughts were recorded in the log without reservation. The log could be said to be the most authentic record of a person. "You can't do this. You can't. Quiet. You can't." Oh, Dr. Hank's eyes gradually lost their luster, and he finally sat down on the chair. At this moment, the female angel reached out and grabbed the destiny system that Dr. Hank opened. She took out a silver-white book and then respectfully handed it to the white-robed young man with both hands. The white-robed young man waved his hand casually, and the female angel and the male angel, Londo, nodded and walked out of Dr. Hank's office. There were still many people in the clinic, and the two angels obviously went to deal with it. For example, the clinic had a day off today. In Dr. Hank's office, the white-robed young man opened the log that recorded everything about Dr. Hank. He seemed to have sensed something and directly opened it from the middle. The white-robed young man looked down and instantly frowned, because on this page of the log, he saw a sentence that recorded Dr. Hank's psychological activities. "Lord, where are you?" This should be the place where the village discussed matters. In the house, the three members of the exploration team and a few representatives of the village were sitting around a table. The girl who had led the three members of the exploration team into the village was sitting quietly on a chair against the wall, her head lowered as she read an old book that was somewhat torn. "In that case, the main objective of the three of you is to find your master Durand, right?" The one who spoke was a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s. He was the village chief, and his name was Charles. That is indeed the case, Chief. As the oldest of the three, Mr. Asakes took the lead to talk. We also have a few female family members and 2 injured people who are currently camping on the other side of the forest. We are very lucky to be able to see the gathering place here. You are indeed lucky. Village Chief Charles nodded. But it can also be said to be unfortunate because we are surrounded by the Burgundian territory and can be said to be isolated and helpless. If you escape here, you will be discovered by the Burgundians sooner or later. Mr. Asakes frowned. He was not clear about the relationship between this village and the Burgundians, but it should be a hostile relationship. Otherwise, the girl would not have asked them to use the Burgundians' attack as a breakthrough point to seek help from the village. However, from Village Chief Charles's tone, it seemed that he was also very wary of the Burgundians and was even worried about attracting unnecessary trouble. We really have no other choice. If you can find Master Durand, we will be very grateful to you, Mr. Arthaces said with a sincere expression. The representatives of the village looked at Village Chief Charles and seemed to be waiting for his opinion. This matter is not simple. Village Chief Charles thought for a while and said, I can't promise you anything in such a short period of time. The rule of our village is that no one is allowed to go out after nightfall. There is not much time left before nightfall, so if you want to mobilize the villagers to search for Durand, you will have to wait until tomorrow morning at the earliest. Lavar suddenly said, Chief, we don't know if Master Durand is still alive. If we stay out for one more night, it will be more dangerous. I'm sorry, this rule has been passed down. Village Chief Charles shook his head and said, Even if I want to help you, I can't find any villagers who are willing to go out at night. I can understand your feelings, but I hope you can understand our difficulties. Asakes said, Then, I would like to bring the women and the injured from the camp here. Is that okay? Village Chief Charles said, That's not a problem, but I'm afraid the sky will be completely dark by the time you return to the camp. Perhaps you can come back tomorrow morning. Really, I don't recommend you to travel at night. Lavar thought for a while and said, We hope to bring some food back. What do you use as the currency here? Village Chief said, It's just some rations. You don't have to buy it. Although our place is remote, we have enough food. I'll get someone to bring some food back for you. Thank you so much. Lavar nodded. Surprisingly, the village representatives, including the village chief, did not seem to have any doubts about the identities of the 3 members of the exploration team. After a short conversation, the village chief left with the excuse that he had something to deal with. The other representatives also left with their own matters. Only one of the representatives of the village remained. You guys didn't meet Jahan at the stream, right? The representative of the village who stayed suddenly said. Mr. Asakes subconsciously looked at the girl who was sitting quietly in the corner reading a book. He noticed that the girl was looking up at him with a warning look in her eyes. We did meet Miss Jahan at the stream. Mr. Asakes could only bite the bullet and say. The man shook his head. Jahan is my daughter. I can tell when I should believe her words and when I shouldn't. I think you met her in the forest, right? What prey did you catch today? Wild boar. Oh no. Mr. Asakes quickly laughed bitterly. Wild boar? The man looked at the girl in the corner and said with a faint smile, Your skills seem to be getting better. Do you really plan to become an outstanding hunter? The man's expression gradually became serious. The girl seemed to have nowhere to look. In the end, her eyes drifted to the window, and her ears were slightly red. As expected of her father's prestige, Mr. Arthaces snickered inwardly. He finally got to see this mischievous girl's face being deflated. Actually, it was Miss Jahan who saved us. Boss Luo suddenly said, My companions and I were chased by a wild boar in the forest. If it wasn't for Miss Jahan, perhaps one of us would have been injured. The girl raised her head and looked at him with her mouth slightly open. Oh, is that so? But you seem to be thinking about something very dangerous? The man looked at Luaccio meaningfully. Boss Luo responded with a smile. The man immediately nodded. All right, I'll believe you for now, but I can't believe your identities for now. It's not just me. I think you can feel it too. The village chief and the others are still worried about your origins. Boss Luo said, The village chief gave us food and even allowed us to bring our companions here. It's already very good. After all, We are outsiders of unknown origins. You can't blame him for this. The man shook his head and said, Jahan may not have told you. Our village has been attacked by the Burgundians several times. There was even a big fire that burned down more than half of the village. What you saw on the way here were many places that were rebuilt later. Lavar couldn't help but say in surprise, if that's the case, then you should be very cautious about our arrival. Why? We're already on guard. The man smiled and said, I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm Jacques d'Arc, the sheriff in charge of the village's tax collection and defense. What? Asakes suddenly pressed his hands on the table and stood up. His eyes widened. You said what? What's your name? Jacques d'Arc. The man. Jacques d'Arc looked at the shocked Asakes in surprise and couldn't help but wonder, is there a problem with my name? No, no problem. Asakes shook his head and sat down again with a heavy heart. Lavar's heart skipped a beat. Mr. Jacques, may I ask, does your village have a name? This is Domremy Village, sir. Mr. Jacques said casually. This place is too remote. It's not strange that you haven't heard of it. We've always been surrounded by the Burgundians' territory. Perhaps even the French royal family has forgotten about our existence. It's even possible that they think we've betrayed them. Mr. Lavar, you don't look very good. Are you feeling unwell? Indeed. Maybe I'm too tired. Lavar shook his head. I'm fine. I'll be fine after some rest. However, his heart was already surging with waves of emotions. Let's not talk about the French royal family that Mr. Jacques mentioned. Where did the Holy Light Kingdom's royal family come from? However, the name of this village was Domremy Village. This shocked Lavar, because he clearly remembered that the traveler Luo had mentioned that the hometown of the saint was called Domremy Village after he found out about it in a mysterious ruin. Then there was the matter that made Asakes lose his composure. Jacques d'Arc, this was the name of a Sash's ancestor. At the same time, he was also the author of the landscape painting that disappeared in the Rose Mansion. Wait, the girl's name. He remembered that she had already introduced herself. Jeanne d'Arc? Jacques d'Arc, the father of this saint. His daughter, wasn't she? Lavar seemed to have thought of a possibility that seemed to be impossible. He couldn't help but take a deep breath and lowered his head to whisper into Asash's ear. Mr. Asakes, may I ask, other than the saint, do your ancestors have other children? You. Asakes swallowed his saliva. You seem to be thinking about something very dangerous. You're not thinking about it? Lavar immediately frowned. Asakes sighed. I don't dare to think about it. You two, what are you talking about? Jacques d'Arc looked at Asakes and Lavar, who were whispering in each other's ears. Nothing, we're just discussing. It's about time to go back to the camp. Asakes quickly said, We've been out for too long. I'm afraid our companions will be worried. Jacques d'Arc thought for a moment and said, That's true, but your camp is outside, and I'm afraid you'll encounter danger at night. How about this? I'll take a few people to go back with you. We won't come back tonight, and we'll come back tomorrow morning. Of course, this was the best thing that could happen. At the very least, they could use the whole night to dig out more information from Jacques d'Arc, who took the initiative to contact them. The problem was, how should they explain the Rose Mansion? It wasn't something that could be found just by setting up a camp. Chapter 2073. Mr. Jacques quickly selected a few villagers who looked quite strong to accompany him. Although they were villagers, they were also the militia that guarded the village. They were holding wooden shields, hunting bows, and some spears. The only iron sword was in Mr. Jacques' hands. It was impossible to ride a horse. This village didn't even have a normal horse to pull a carriage, let alone a high-grade warhorse. When they set off, Village Chief Charles came to see them off and seemed to have whispered something to Mr. Jacques. The three members of the exploration group didn't see the young girl Jeanne. She had already been ordered by Mr. Jacques to go home and reflect. At this moment, Arthaces was still vexed over how he should explain the matter of Rose Mansion after reaching his goal. But now, he could only take things one step at a time. If it didn't work, they could work together to tie up Mr. Jacques and the others. However, he did not know if the three men in the exploration team and the few women in the mansion could defeat this group of village militia who had obviously been trained. Wait, why did I have such a dangerous thought? Arthas was instantly shocked by his own violent thoughts. There had never been any disputes in the Holy Light Kingdom, let alone war. Everyone was calm and peaceful, and there was no need to use force at all. Even Laval, who had learned swordsmanship, was only a fan of swordsmanship. Fencing was only a sport. But what surprised Essex was that after this thought appeared, he couldn't get rid of it. He even had an inconceivable feeling of wanting to do something. "Oh, you're the only child in the family?" At this time, Mr. Jacques slowly said. Essex didn't need to think to know that this was Jacques culture towards the traveler Roland. In fact, in the beginning, there were questions like, "How old are you? Who else is in the family? Do you have any skills?" Problems like this kept popping up. If I were 10 years younger, do you believe that Mr. Jacques would be asking me? Mr. Essex walked to Laval and said with a smile, "Isn't that perfect?" Lear said calmly, "It just so happens that we know very little about this traveler." Essex shrugged, "But knowing the answers to these questions won't be of much use. Have you thought of how to explain the incident at the mansion?" Laval suddenly asked. At this time, Essex went all out and said with a fierce look, "It's hard to explain. Why don't we just tie everyone up? If we catch them off guard, it should be possible." Laval frowned, but surprisingly, he didn't refute Sasha's words. Perhaps he was also considering the feasibility of the operation. Mr. Essex couldn't help but look at Laval with a strange expression. At this moment, Mr. Jacques suddenly asked, "If you're camping in another part of the forest, do you see a large house?" Essex and Laval stopped abruptly and looked at Mr. Jacques in bewilderment. Boss Luo said casually, "The place where our companions are camping is in a large house. This house is very beautiful, and there are many roses planted there." Mr. Jacques smiled casually. "The roses there are indeed very beautiful. After all, when I was planting them, I spent a lot of effort." Boss Luo was surprised. "So, that large house is yours, Mr. Jacques? It's a villa that was built in the past." Mr. Jacques smiled. "I used to live there for a period of time, but then the Burgundians started to attack here, so we had no choice but to move back to the village. It's safer there." "Mr. Jacques, I'm really sorry. Without your permission, we used your house," Luaccio said apologetically. "It's okay, it's empty anyway," Mr. Jacques said indifferently. "Also, there's nothing valuable in there. Plus, I'm very happy to help people in need." Hearing Mr. Jacques reply, Laval and Essex opened their eyes wide in disbelief as if they had seen a ghost. "What is going on?" Laval couldn't help but mutter to himself. Rose Mansion, how did Mr. Jacques build it? And from the expressions of the accompanying militia, they obviously knew about this. There's good news and bad news. Essex took a deep breath and lowered his voice. "Laval, which one do you want to hear?" "Say it, Mr. Essex." "The good news is that we don't have to explain the mansion anymore," Essex said with a serious expression. "The bad news is the development of the situation is getting weirder and weirder." This was because Arthas had thought of something even more bizarre. It was the problem of Jacques d'Arc's identity. He opened his mouth a few times, but he didn't know how to ask. He even wanted to rush in front of Jacques d'Arc and ask him, "Are you my ancestor?" "Mr. Jacques, can I ask you a question?" Boss Luo suddenly asked. "For Jean's sake, I'll answer your question seriously, young man," Mr. Jacques said with a smile, but there was a hint of sternness in his eyes above the smile. Boss Luo acted like he didn't hear it. "I heard from Miss Jean that there has always been a demon in the lake in this forest. Mr. Jacques used to live in a mansion. Is there no problem?" Mr. Jacques chuckled and said, "Jean must have told you that this demon likes to dig out the hearts of pure men and women, right? This legend is false." Laval frowned and asked. Mr. Jacques said, "Since it's a legend, I don't know if it's true or not. But if the legend is true, we have lived here for generations. How can we not discover the existence of a lake in the forest? In other words, this legend is false." Essex thought. Mr. Jacques shook his head and said, "We all use such legends to scare the children in the village. Because once a child sneaks into the forest out of curiosity, there is still the danger of encountering wild beasts. Also, there have been several incidents in the past where the Burgundians secretly lurked in the forest, captured our villagers, interrogated them, and finally killed them and threw away their corpses. What about the old hunter of the hunter's cabin? The old hunter died long ago. Mr. Jacques sighed and said, Jean and he had a good relationship, but the old hunter couldn't overcome his illness in the end. Before he died, he sneaked into the forest, creating the illusion that he would never return. His body was taken away by me for burial. Jean, this child, has always been taking care of the cabin, probably thinking that one day the old hunter will suddenly return. Why did you tell us this? Luaccio looked at Mr. Jacques' eyes and asked. Mr. Jacques said indifferently, This is not a secret that needs to be kept. Jean, this child, will know sooner or later. Also, you are only passers-by here and will leave in the end. So, if you can keep the secret before you leave, it naturally doesn't matter. That's right, we are at most passers-by. Boss Luo nodded. In the following journey, Mr. Jacques seemed to have exhausted all his interest in the young boss Luo. He rarely took the initiative to speak, and his mind was focused on hurrying. When they passed by the hunter's cabin, they didn't even stop. When they came out of the forest, the sky was almost dark. Mr. Jacques asked people to light torches to illuminate the area. The fire could effectively drive away some wild beasts, so it wasn't a big problem. Boss Luo casually looked at the forest behind him at this time. After walking for more than 10 minutes, they could already see the light coming from the hall of the Rose Mansion. Thousands of troops and horses. I'll call my companions to open the door. Asek said quickly, and then walked quickly. Who is it? The moment she heard the knocking sound, the maid Kay Lily in the hall suddenly became nervous. It's me, open the door. Boss Aseks. The maid clearly recognized the voice and hurriedly ran to the door to open it in surprise. At this time, she saw Arthesis rush in nervously. Boss, what's wrong? They're awake. Aseks looked at the resting area in the hall in surprise. He saw that Ludic Principal and Duran City Lord's male assistant were awake and sitting on the sofa. They're awake, but there's a problem. Kay Lily shook her head and said worriedly, After Mr. Ludic and the others woke up, they've been like this. No matter what we say, they don't seem to hear it. They don't even have any reaction. Aseks frowned and looked at them again. Indeed, he found that whether it was Ludic Principal or Duran City Lord's male assistant, their eyes seemed to be abnormally empty. Mr. Aseks, are you the only one who came back? Nan Xiaonan's voice suddenly sounded. Arthashes hurriedly composed himself and thought for a moment before saying, We'll talk about Ludic and the rest later. Listen up, we have successfully reached the village and brought back some food and people. That's great. Kay Lily was pleasantly surprised. Don't be happy yet. Aseks said seriously. Things are a bit strange, I don't have time to explain now. Anyway, when we bring them back, no matter what they say, don't say anything. Just listen. If you have any doubts, leave them because I have the same doubts as you. Remember what I said. Saying that, Arthakes hurriedly walked out. In the hall, Nan Xiaonan subconsciously looked at Miss Servant Girl. Her face was full of doubts. Mr. Asakes brought back food. We can cook now, Lady Nan. Miss Servant Girl smiled at this time. As long as you're happy, let me introduce you. This is Mr. Jacques. After a while, Asakes entered the door again, but this time he brought Mr. Jacques and his entourage. Jacques, isn't he the painter of that painting? Nan Xiaonan couldn't help opening her mouth in surprise. Miss Servant Girl's eyes fell on Mr. Jacques since he entered the door. This was a very rare situation. According to Nan Xiaonan's observation, Miss Servant Girl's eyes, as long as the boss was present, almost 99% of the time would be on him. The remaining 1%, even a blink. But soon, Miss Servant Girl withdrew her eyes. Yuya's eyes, as usual, only fell on Boss Luo. Nan Xiaonan couldn't even understand anything from Miss Servant Girl's face. But she remembered what Asake said before. From now on, just listen, don't ask. At this time, Mr. Jacques suddenly said, Mr. Arthashes, these two companions of yours don't seem to be very good. Mr. Athax said, We were ambushed previously, and the two of them were unconscious. When they woke up, they became like this. I'm guessing that it's because they were too frightened. Perhaps they'll recover after enough rest. We don't have a good solution at present. Mr. Jacques said, You can use the guest room upstairs. The patient needs a good rest. When we return to the village tomorrow morning, I will ask the doctor to come and see your two companions." With that, Mr. Jacques turned back and asked two of the militiamen to help the sluggish Ludic and the male assistant up, and sent them to the guest room upstairs. Mr. Jacques said at this time, "You have been staying here for a long time. Presumably you are hungry and tired. This time we brought some food. Mr. Puma, please take the food to the kitchen for processing. After the door on the left of the kitchen, there should be some spices I saved before in the cellar. Maybe you can use them." The militiaman named Puma nodded at this time. "Okay, Mr. Jacques, I'm happy to serve you." Miss Servant Girl K. or Lily glanced at Mr. Jacques in surprise, and then looked at Boss Asakes, because there was indeed a cellar on the left of the mansion's kitchen. But how did this person know so clearly? She saw Asakes looking at her at this time, gently shaking his head, motioning her not to say anything. "So," Mr. Jacques sat down at this time, just like the host, "before dinner, we can have a pleasant conversation." At this time, Laval said coldly, "I'm afraid, with our current situation, we can't be happy." Mr. Jacques said, "Regarding your master Durand's matter, I am also very sorry. But since he has been missing for a day and a night, I'm afraid. Everyone, you'd better be mentally prepared." At this time, a scream instantly startled everyone in the hall. It seems to be Mr. Puma's voice. A militiaman said quickly, "I'll go out and see." With that, this militiaman instantly picked up a wooden shield and a stick with a sharpened iron plate tied to it, and quickly walked to the door. Unexpectedly, the door suddenly opened at this time. The militiaman was knocked to the ground at once. At the same time, one figure after another rushed into the hall of the mansion. It was a knight wearing a silver armor and holding a fine weapon. There were at least 15 or 16 knights who rushed into the hall, and now they stood in 2 rows. At the entrance of the door, a young man was holding a helmet and walking slowly. It's a Burgundian." The militiaman who was knocked to the ground screamed at this time, "It's a Burgundian knight." A bright light flashed in front of the militiaman's eyes, and what followed was a bloody head rolling on the floor. Seeing this, Maid Kay or Lily instantly turned pale with fright and fell to the ground. The air seemed to have solidified. At this moment, the leading young knight casually handed the long sword to the knight behind him. Then, he looked at the crowd and said indifferently, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From now on, you are my captives." Chapter 2074. In the dark night, a figure nimbly ran towards the location of the lights, Rose Mansion. This figure seemed to be very familiar with the surroundings. Soon, it arrived outside the walls of Rose Mansion. With a light leap, it pressed its palm against the wall and directly flipped over the wall. When it landed, it rolled a few times to reduce the impact. Then, it quickly stood up and approached a window near the main hall of the mansion. It peeked its head out to observe the situation in the main hall. But soon, this person who was walking in the dark was alarmed by what happened in the hall of the mansion. At this moment, the blood of the soldier who was beheaded had already formed a small puddle. In the main hall, the Burgundian cavaliers were filled with murderous intent. On the other hand, the people on Mr. Jacques' side who were surrounded had a terrible expression on their faces. "I'm Lion, the captain of the cavaliers." The young cavalier sneered and said, "I'm sorry. From now on, you're all my captives." "Damn Burgundians!" Instantly, 2 soldiers who were agitated by the death of their comrade picked up their weapons and rushed toward the young captain, Lion. But almost at the same time, 2 cavaliers rushed out from the group of cavaliers. After a simple exchange of blows, the cavaliers easily knocked down the 2 soldiers. Whether it was in terms of equipment or physical condition, the soldiers were obviously no match for the cavaliers. It was expected that they would be knocked down so easily. It seems like some of you don't want to listen to my sentence. The captain of the cavaliers, Lion, shook his head and said with a blank expression, "Perhaps you don't understand the situation you are in. Burgundian cavaliers, what do you want to do?" Mr. Jacques took a deep breath and slowly walked out. He placed his hand on the sword on his waist and looked at the cavaliers with a pale face. The young lion glanced at Mr. Jacques. He didn't answer Mr. Jacques' question. Instead, he said, "Since you have a sword in your hand, I'll give you a chance to have a fair duel with me." As long as you can defeat me, I'll let you leave this place." As Nan Xiaonan listened, she sneered and said, "Letting us out of this house and then catching us back doesn't count as breaking a promise." Leon Bert looked at him coldly, but he didn't refute. Instead, he looked at Mr. Jacques again. "Remove your weapon, master of the house. Be like a warrior facing the challenge of fate." Mr. Jacques' expression changed slightly. His hand gripped the hilt of his sword, but his fingers were constantly loosening and tightening. "Sir, don't listen to him. Let's charge out." "That's right. Surely these Burgundian butchers are not so kind. Even if only one of us can make it back to the village, we have to bring back news of the Burgundians' arrival." "Mr. Jacques, enough!" Mr. Jacques yelled in a deep voice. Under everyone's gaze, he slowly pulled out the sword at his waist and pointed it at the young Leon Bell. "Knight of Burgundy, I accept your challenge. I hope you can abide by the oath of a knight. Looks like tonight won't be too boring." The young man chuckled. He waved his hand and said, "Bring me my weapon." In an instant, one of the cavalrymen behind him carried a two-handed sword to Leon Bell. A two-handed sword was a heavy weapon, but this young Leon Bell could easily lift it with one hand. When he swung it, it didn't seem to be strenuous at all. This kind of astonishing arm strength instantly caused the militia to be frightened. Mr. Jacques wasn't a soldier. He only had some property in the village and ran a farm. Even if he had learned some skills, he was probably an amateur. How could he duel with Leon Bell, who could easily lift a two-handed sword? This wasn't a fair duel at all. "Why don't you let me do it?" At this moment, a voice that seemed to be able to calm everyone suddenly sounded. Although this voice came suddenly, it didn't make people feel that it was abrupt. It was like a gentle breeze that instantly blew away the tense atmosphere in the hall. "What an incredible guy," Mr. Essex muttered at this moment, and then all his attention fell on the speaker. It was the guest of his mansion, the traveler of 7 capitals, Mr. Lowe. What made Nan Xiaonan curious was that the boss actually took the initiative to stand up. Even if he wanted to find someone to solve this problem, shouldn't it be her who was a new employee and didn't have any human rights yet? "You, indescribable existence, stop fooling around." "Miss Maid?" Miss Maid's expression was normal. Nan Xiaonan admired Miss Maid's calmness. After knowing her for so long, Nan Xiaonan found that no matter what the boss wanted to do, Miss Maid never had any objection. This kind of crazy blind obedience made Nan Xiaonan speechless many times. But on the other hand, perhaps only someone like Miss Maid, who agreed unconditionally, could get the boss's approval. Unconditional obedience from the bottom of her heart. Even her instinct, she didn't resist at all. Nan Xiaonan knew she couldn't do it. Even if she was bound by the Black Soul Messenger, even if she had lost the possibility of betrayal, her inner thoughts at this moment. Mr. Jacques was stunned by the young man who stood up and then nodded. "Young man, I admit your courage, but it's a pity that we haven't known each other for long. I appreciate your kindness, but this duel should belong to me." Boss Luo looked at Leon Bell. "I also have the right to resist, right?" The cavalry captain sneered at this time, but there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. "I also appreciate people with courage, and I'm more willing to accept those who dare to challenge fate. I even welcome the two of you to attack me together. Give this brave young man a sharp sword." This cavalry captain was quite arrogant and confident, but he was also quite a deterrent to his subordinates. In an instant, a cavalryman pulled out his weapon and directly threw it at Boss Luo's feet. "Actually, this sword is enough for me." Boss Luo shook his head at this time. He stretched out his hand and pressed on the back of Mr. Jacques' hand that was holding the sword. Mr. Jacques was suddenly alarmed. "It's good that you have courage, but you shouldn't force yourself." When he saw Luo Chio's eyes, he swallowed the words he was about to say. Under the gaze of this pair of calm eyes, Mr. Jacques let the young man take away the sword. Mr. Jacques gritted his teeth and said to Boss Luo in a low voice, "Young man, you are a brave guy. You must survive. If you can defeat this knight, I'm even willing to marry my daughter to you." Boss Luo heard this and smiled. He looked at Miss Maid and responded, "I think because of this sentence, I have a reason to fight. This is the most precious promise for me." Mr. Jacques didn't find any problem. After all, marrying his daughter was indeed a precious promise. But he didn't think this young man could defeat the opponent, so he just gave him some encouragement. Of course, if this young man could defeat the opponent, in this era where the war even affected this remote village, it was certainly a good thing to have a brave son-in-law. Anyway, Jehan was still young, and there was still time for them to get along. This moment was enough for Mr. Jacques to think about many things. It seems that you have discussed it. Leon Bell looked quite patient, or maybe he was enjoying the time of watching his prey struggle. Leon Bell walked out with a big sword and sneered. This is a beautiful promise, and it will even become a story that will be passed down. The premise is that you can defeat your destiny, me. The big sword was swung out instantly, and the whistling sound of the wind was very scary. Boss Luo stepped back and dodged. At this time, the big sword directly chopped on the floor, smashing a not small hole in the floor. Mr. Jacques and the others couldn't help but break out in cold sweat for this young man who had just been promoted. Nan Xiaonan, on the other hand, thoughtlessly flipped through the items to see if there were any snacks. Only then did she remember that Rose Mansion was a very poor place. Huh. At this moment, Nan Xiaonan found that Miss Maid was not next to her. She subconsciously looked for Miss Maid, who had walked to the counter in the hall. What's she doing? Nan Xiaonan couldn't help but widen her eyes, watching Miss Maid slowly move the needle of a phonograph placed behind the counter. This phonograph was very old, and it had been placed on the counter for a long time. Maybe it's the only valuable thing in Rose Mansion. The sound of fencing gradually became more frequent. Boss Luo, who was holding a one-handed sword, walked around Leon Bell nimbly. Miss Maid took out a record. Nan Xiaonan believed that this record definitely didn't belong to Rose Mansion. Anyway, she even took out the microscope, so she didn't care about the record. Little Snail, Chinese network with a chuckle. Miss May put the record into the phonograph and then put down the needle. The record slowly turned, and the bronze loudspeaker began to play the melody of the record. The melody sounded in the hall of Rose Mansion. It was a symphony, Revolution Etude in C minor. Time seemed to slow down a lot because of this strange melody. That thrilling battle, at this moment, seemed to have become a competition without the smell of blood because of the sound of the music. Miss Maid's eyes gradually blurred, looking at Boss Luo, who was pointing at the long sword with his finger. Simple sword movements, simple dodging. Under the beautiful music, Boss Luo's sword became lighter and lighter. This sword technique actually came from the dragon slaying skill that he learned in Chessboard World. The sword moved faster and faster with the rhythm of the music, like a continuous drizzle. Leon Bell, on the other hand, was feeling more and more uncomfortable. His two-handed greatsword had always been invincible, but at this moment, he felt as if he had fallen into a quagmire. His whole body felt like it was being tied down, and his speed of swinging his sword had slowed down by more than half. The more he fought, the more uncomfortable he felt. The more uncomfortable he was, the more chaotic his attack rhythm was. Gradually, even his breathing became very disordered. Most of the floor of the hall had been smashed into pieces by the two-handed sword, but Leon Bell couldn't touch his opponent at all. Instead, the seemingly ordinary one-handed sword had cut Leon Bell's body many times. If he wasn't wearing armor, there should be at least 10 wounds on his body. Damn it! Where's this music? What kind of witchcraft is this? Stop it! His disorderly breathing and unbearable rhythm gradually made the youth realize that the young cavalry captain, who was quite powerful himself, was becoming frustrated. He even couldn't help but roar out loud. Catch that woman! No, she must be a witch. Catch that witch for me. Stop this damn sound. Stop it. The sound stopped abruptly. That simple one-handed sword knocked away Leon Bell's greatsword, and then pierced Leon Bell's throat like a bolt of lightning. This was a place that even armor couldn't protect. Leon Bell's body froze as if he was struck by lightning. He took a deep breath, but he couldn't lift up the sword anymore. The feeling of the sword touching his throat made Leon Bell feel like he was going to die. You let me win. The music was still playing, and Boss Luo's voice seemed to be part of it. Seeing this, the cavalrymen were all stunned. Then, their first reaction was to pull out their weapons and charged forward. Mr. Jacques was the first to react, as if he had just woken up from a dream. He quickly shouted, "Burgundian knight, can't you afford to lose? I'll nail your dignity and shame to my body. Even if I die and go to the underworld, I'll still praise your great name." "Stop it," Leon Bell shouted in a deep voice with a terrible expression. "Back off." The sword was still pointed at Leon Bell's throat. At this moment, Mr. Jacques asked the rest of the militia to bring down Ludic and the male assistant. Mr. Jacques looked at the crowd and said in a low voice, "I'm afraid they'll come back immediately after we leave. We have to split up. No matter who it is, we have to send back the news of the Burgundians' attack. Do you understand?" "We understand, Mr. Jacques." Mr. Assaix nodded and looked at the traveler, Mr. Luo, nervously. He didn't know how long he could suppress Leon Bell. At this moment, Assaix didn't have time to think about some abnormal things. For example, the village didn't have electricity, but the Rose Mansion had electricity. Based on his observation of the village, this village didn't even have any mechanical equipment. How could Mr. Jacques have the nerve to say that he built the mansion? However, the situation didn't allow Assaix to ask these questions. He and Laval each supported the male assistant and Ludic. Under Mr. Jacques' lead, the crowd slowly left the Rose Mansion. "You guys go first," Boss Luo said at this moment. Mr. Jacques knew that this was a strategy to give his people time to escape. But at the same time, this young man's danger would increase exponentially. But now is not the time to be sentimental. Mr. Jacques took a deep breath and said, "You must come back alive. Come and fulfill my promise." "My child, are we leaving the boss like this?" Nan Shounen couldn't help but ask Miss Maid quietly. "Let's go to the village and wait for our master." Miss Maid smiled at this moment. "Why you seem to be in a good mood, good mood?" The sword was still pointed at Leon Bell's throat. Only Boss Luo and the Burgundian cavalry were left in the hall. Leon Bell had calmed down. "Brave swordsman, your swordsmanship is very good. Are you interested in joining me? I can guarantee that you will be my most important partner in the future. The military life may not be suitable for me." Boss Luo smiled casually. "I'm a carefree person." At the same time, Boss Luo put down his sword gently. In the blink of an eye, those crossbow-bearing cavalrymen swarmed forward, completely surrounding them, and began to press on. Leon Bell waved his hand and stopped the cavalry. He tried to persuade him again. "You don't look like you're from the village. Donremy village is isolated and helpless. It's only a matter of time before it falls. Smart people know what to do. I believe that you're not the kind of person who would ruin your future for a village girl's marriage. This girl might even be illiterate. My partner should be far away." Boss Luo smiled casually and said, "Then, I'll be leaving too. I hope everyone will have a good night here." "Humph, ungrateful." Leon Bell shook his head and said, "I cherish talents, but I don't like stubborn people." He waved his hand. The cavalry no longer had any scruples. They sneered and swung their weapons. Facing the swarm of attacks, Boss Luo was calm. At this moment, the light on the roof of the mansion suddenly exploded with a loud bang. At the same time, the window on one side was smashed open. Then, 3 fist-sized balls were thrown into the hall. In an instant, the ball released a thick gray smoke. This smoke was extremely irritating. Just breathing in a little bit would cause people to cough uncontrollably. Their throat, nose, and eyes would burn with pain. "Damn it! Don't cut randomly. They're teammates. Ah, dash! Where are they? Where are they? They ran away. Chase them! Chase them!" The noise in the hall gradually quieted down. It seemed that all the cavalrymen had gone out, including Captain Leon Bell. In a room on the 3rd floor of the mansion, under the dim moonlight, one could vaguely see the outline of the room. "Thank you for saving me, Ms. Jenna." Boss Luo's voice suddenly sounded. "Shoo!" At this moment, the girl leaned against the door and listened carefully. She quickly put her finger on her lips and said, "They might not be far away. They should be far away." Boss Luo said, "Why are you here, Ms. Jenna?" The girl exhaled slowly. "I've been following you, but you didn't know. I didn't expect to encounter such a thing. Anyway, thank you for saving my father." "I just saved myself," Boss Luo said softly. "Anyway, thank you." The girl didn't dare to look at the young man's eyes. She looked out of the window and said in a lower voice, I'm not illiterate. She even emphasized her words. Chapter 2075. Closed for one day. With these words written on the door of the clinic and a sign with the word closed, the patients who came to see the clinic had to go home. They didn't know what happened in Hank's clinic. In fact, in the clinic, the patients who had come to register for treatment in the morning were all like puppets with their strings cut. They lowered their heads and sat quietly in the waiting room. The two high-level angels walked around and made sure they didn't miss anything before returning to Dr. Hank's office. The white-clothed young man was reading Dr. Hank's destiny log. The two high-level angels following him didn't see anything wrong with the white-clothed young man's expression. After a while, the white-clothed young man closed the diary in his hand and closed his eyes. The two high-level angels could only wait again. The white-clothed young man slowly opened his eyes and said in a low voice, "It's done." The female angel quickly asked, "My lord, did you find the source of the medicine Hank sold?" The white-clothed young man said calmly, "He imported this medicine from the city of Dawn, but he got it from a medicine merchant in the Free City." Interestingly, Hank didn't know there was a problem with this medicine because he thought it was a new antidepressant and he had been using it for a long time. How come he didn't know? The female angel couldn't help but frown. The white-clothed young man said calmly, "Maybe he knew, maybe he didn't know. There are many reasons why he didn't know. Even if he knew, there were many reasons why he didn't know." Langdo's expression changed slightly, and so did the female angel. Clearly, both of them had thought of the same possibility. The female angel looked serious. "My lord, do you mean that someone changed Hank's diary? But how is that possible? Anyone who can change the diary is... Could it be? They were all existences like the saint in the Free City, the seraph in the blazing sky, and the Holy Mother, Mary. They were all great existences who had the highest authority in the 7 capitals of the Holy Light Kingdom. Be careful with your words." The white-clothed young man glanced at the female angel coldly. The female angel lowered her head in horror. "As I said, there are many possibilities," the white-clothed youth said calmly. "But we have to find the one and only one." The female angel nodded and said, "However, this medicine was imported from the City of Dawn." "But didn't the one in the City of Dawn? If that's the case, could it be that the City of Dawn has become a place of corruption? To the believers of the City of Dawn, the Star of Dawn just hasn't appeared yet." The white-robed young man said with an expressionless face, "Over the years, the City of Dawn has always provided the most wish power. I will give my approval to Mr. President, who is currently in charge of managing the City of Dawn." The female angel said, "But the Star of Dawn isn't here, and the holy light of the statue can't illuminate every believer in the City of Dawn. Perhaps it can identify some." She nervously glanced at the white-clothed youth. Seeing that the other party didn't move, she cautiously said, "I have some ulterior motives. Let me see this medicine merchant who is in charge of selling the imported medicine." The white-clothed youth suddenly stood up. "Deal with this clinic first." He casually handed the destiny diary to the female angel. After the female angel received the destiny diary, she immediately sensed something. She was given the right to temporarily change Hank's destiny diary. Soon, Hank's clinic opened for business again. The patients in the waiting room raised their heads. Everything was normal. Dr. Hank, who was in the office, opened the door. Next, Rose Mansion. In a dark guest room on the 3rd floor, a young girl's breathing could be heard clearly. It was very quiet. "They should be far away by now. We can go out now." The young girl, Jenna, turned around and looked at Luaccio. "We need to get back to the village as soon as possible. This group of cavalry definitely did not come with good intentions. The Burgundians have already attacked us several times." Luaccio thought for a moment and said, "The fastest way to get to the village is to pass through the forest. But it's inconvenient for the cavaliers to move in the forest. I think Mr. Jacques and the others should be able to get back to the village in time to inform Village Chief Charles. Even if we know in advance, we won't be able to reduce the losses." The young girl shook her head and said with a worried expression, Before I helped you, I sneaked around and found more than 20 cavaliers half a kilometer away, including the ones in the hall. 40 to 50 cavaliers are undoubtedly a disaster for the weak defense of the village. Boss Luo sized up the young girl and asked in a low voice, "Miss Jenna, what do you plan to do?" "First, we have to get back to the village." The young girl lowered her head and bit her thumbnail. She thought for a moment and said, "But if we rush now, I'm afraid we'll only catch up with the Burgundian cavaliers. It won't help. If we want to meet up with my father before they reach the village, we need to take another route." "Another route?" Boss Luo blinked. The young girl thought for a moment and said, "There's an underground river. We can use it to get back to the village quickly, but is it dangerous?" The young girl nodded. The flow of the underground river is very fast, and it's quite narrow. Once you're washed into the water, no matter how good you are at swimming, you won't be able to protect your life. Boss Luo said, "Miss Jenna, what do you plan to do?" "I'll choose the underground river," the young girl said decisively. "But you don't have to accompany me. In the eyes of the Burgundian cavaliers, you must be escaping in the direction of the village. So if you escape in the opposite direction, you'll definitely be able to escape this disaster. You've already saved my father once. For strangers, you've done too much. There's no need to put your life on the line." Boss Luo said, "My companions have also gone back with Mr. Jacques. I'm afraid I can't leave my companions behind and leave alone. Miss Jenna, since we're going back through the underground river, let's go." "You trust me?" the young girl suddenly asked. "Do you know how dangerous this underground river is?" Boss Luo smiled and said, "I trust Miss Jenna, who has already walked through the underground river at least once." "How do you know?" The young girl suddenly widened her eyes. The young girl of 14 or 15 years old was still somewhat immature. Even though she looked like a thoughtful person when she acted like a little girl, she was still very cute. After all, the young girl was only the daughter of a farmer who had lived in a remote village since she was young. She might be intelligent, but her knowledge was definitely limited. Moreover, Boss Luo had been a demon king for a long time. If Miss Jenna hasn't walked through the underground river, how would you know that it can reach the village? Boss Luo smiled and said, "Sometimes I'll sneak out to hunt." The young girl's face was slightly red. "There were a few times when I lost track of time, so I had to use the underground river's secret passage. Miss Jenna is a girl who likes to take risks." Boss Luo's gaze gradually softened. "What do you mean? Are you saying that I have a wild personality?" The young girl lightly snorted. "I scored full marks in all the etiquette lessons that father prepared for me. The home tutor can't even teach me anymore." Boss Luo said, "I believe that Miss Jenna will definitely become a qualified lady in the future." And in short, the young girl emphasized, "Regarding the underground river, you are not allowed to tell my father. No one. Then let it be a little secret between me and Miss Jenna." Boss Luo nodded with a sincere expression. "Who wants to forget it?" The young girl took a deep breath and said seriously, "It's getting late. Even if the underground river is faster, if we waste time here, we won't be able to catch up with the Burgundian cavalry. Come with me." "Of course." Boss Luo nodded and immediately said, "From now on, Miss Jenna, you are my commander. I will do whatever you ask me to do." "Commander." "TSK." The young girl flicked her tongue and asked coldly, "Did you always talk to girls like this when you were in the city? Or do people in the city always talk like this?" "It's getting late, let's go." Boss Luo smiled casually and pushed the door open. He then moved aside and bowed. "Commander, please." The young girl took a deep breath and stepped out of the room with firm steps. "This guy is 1.5 head taller than me. But in 2 years, no, in 1 year, I might be able to catch up. I need to drink more milk. I heard that men in the city prefer the busted type. I need at least 2 cups of milk every day. I'm doing this for my own health. Hurry up, we must catch up with those guys." In the forest, the young and powerful captain of the cavalry team, Leon Bell, urged the soldiers of the cavalry team. The soldiers could feel the anger of their captain. Originally, this was going to be an easy hunting mission. They would rest in that big house until midnight and then attack Domremy village before dawn. This was going to be a difficult attack, even more difficult than the military drill. However, They didn't expect that it would be destroyed by a young man who was so good at swordsmanship. That young man who easily defeated Leon Bell. His swordsmanship was really amazing. Perhaps only a master swordsman could do that. No one laughed at Leon Bell secretly, because if they were in his place, they would lose faster, more thoroughly, and more miserably. However, no matter how strong one person was, the charge of dozens of cavalrymen was invincible. Sir, there's an extinguished torch in front of us. Maybe it was thrown away by the owner of the house when he escaped. A cavalryman in front of them turned around and said, I think we can catch up with them soon. This is the right direction. They might have escaped in different directions. Leon Bell frowned and said, No one would leave such an obvious clue, let alone a local. I'm afraid this is a trap to confuse us. Let's go another way. Who is it? At this moment, another cavalryman yelled and then swept the torch to the side, illuminating the side. There were weeds, bushes, and dead branches. The forest at night was like a dark maze. The torch couldn't illuminate everything. The only thing that could be seen was a black shadow flashing through the weeds and bushes. Maybe it was just an illusion. It should be a beast in the forest. Don't panic, let's keep going, Leon Bell said decisively. The black shadow didn't move for a while. Maybe it was just a beast in the forest that was disturbed by the cavalryman. The cavalryman quickly calmed down. Leon Bell looked forward, but his mind was thinking about the duel in the mansion hall. He was trying to find a way to deal with the young man who defeated him. Damn it, how could there be such a sword technique? Just as he was feeling vexed, Leon Bell suddenly felt a powerful force crashing into him. It even threw him off his war horse and onto the ground. The horse was startled, and it instantly stood up and neighed. All the cavalrymen were shocked. What is this, a human? On the ground, their captain, Leon Bell, was being pushed to the ground by a fat, middle-aged man in strange clothes. However, this middle-aged man's body was very strange. The man's face was ferocious, and his skin was cracked in many places. The cracked areas were emitting a strange orange light, like the color of flames. At the same time, a wave of heat spread out in all directions with this terrifying guy as the center. This horrible middle-aged man seemed to be in extreme pain, and his eyes were showing the whites. He suddenly rushed out, pushed Leon Bell to the ground, and grabbed Leon Bell's neck with both hands. Leon Bell's arm was strong enough to lift a big sword with one hand, but he couldn't get rid of this horrible middle-aged man. Captain, the first cavalryman to react, screamed and jumped off his warhorse. Then, he raised his sword and stabbed at the strange guy. He hit the target. The cavalryman was delighted. However, this weird guy didn't seem to feel any pain. He suddenly turned around and stared at the cavalryman who stabbed him with his white eyes. He let go of Leon Bell and pounced on the cavalryman. His hand even pierced through the cavalryman's hard breastplate and stabbed into the cavalryman's chest. He even dug out the cavalryman's heart from his chest. All the cavalrymen were shocked. Demon. This is a demon. Demon. Chaos. A moment later, flames danced wildly in the forest. War horses neighed, and miserable cries rang out one after another. Then the flames went out, and there was no sound. Chapter 2076. On the steep slope, the surroundings were dark and damp, and the only source of light was the torch in the girl's hand. She walked in front. Her shadow was swayed by the wind in the cave under the light of the fire. Under the magnified shadow of the fire, the girl's thin body looked even thinner, but she walked very fast. Can you keep up? There are a lot of sharp stones on the road. Did you hurt your feet? This was probably the girl's way of showing concern a more direct way. Miss Jenna, I'm behind you, don't worry. Oh, the girl didn't look back. She just answered softly, and then she sped up. She thought that this guy from the city was just pretending. How to say it? Maybe this guy's swordsmanship was really good, but he was not a hunter, and it was his first time walking on this rugged road. He said it so easily. Even if she had experience, she still needed a lot of stamina. But when she met this guy in the forest, he seemed to have shown some good survival skills. She shouldn't be distracted by these things at this time. Be careful. The girl's feet slipped, and she was about to slide down the steep cliff. She was shocked and instinctively grabbed something to stabilize her body, but what she grabbed was a warm hand. Half of the girl's body was about to reach out of the abyss. At this time, the falling stones were swallowed by the darkness, and the girl's heart was beating fast. She felt as if she had just survived a disaster, and her whole body was drained of energy. She felt a little weak. Her body was pulled back little by little. This underground cave is too damp. There's a lot of moss on the stone surface. Boss Luo suddenly said, I almost tripped a few times just now. Luckily, Miss Jenna looked back from time to time to remind me. I did remind her about this? I think I did. No. The girl who had just survived a disaster took a deep breath and calmed down a little. I'm fine. Let's continue. We'll see the underground river soon. And thank you for saving me just now. Boss Luo said casually. Miss Jenna also saved me and my companions in the forest. Also, when we were in the mansion, it was Miss Na who helped me escape from the cavalry. The girl blinked her eyes and suddenly said, Can we be considered as friends of life and death? Boss Luo said, On the road of adventure, there will always be many dangerous situations. Helping each other can effectively ensure the safety of the team. Miss Rana, what you said about a life and death friendship is a deeper level of affection. So for the time being, it shouldn't be considered a relationship. Was it just an adventure? The young girl lightly grunted and quickly withdrew her hand that was still being held. This guy's hand was smooth and delicate, without even a single callus. How could he catch her master? I really don't know how this guy learned such a high-level sword technique when there are no traces of labor on his hands. Sword technique, shouldn't it be accumulated over a long period of time, perseverance, and countless amounts of sweat? But it was really a very warm hand. I wonder if we can make it in time. She forcefully diverted her attention. She really didn't know why her attention would always drift away inadvertently. If it goes smoothly, it should be possible. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, I'm just afraid it won't go smoothly. Why? The young girl couldn't help but frown. Boss Luo said seriously, I thought about it carefully. I realized that the people around me would more or less suddenly face some troublesome things. Maybe it's because I'm more likely to bring bad luck to people. The young girl opened her mouth in surprise. How could someone describe her like this? But after thinking about it carefully, it seemed like such a thing. For example, this guy's missing Master Durand, and after their group appeared, the Burgundian cavalry also appeared. The young girl shook her head and said indifferently, The Burgundian cavalry has attacked our village more than once. In this area controlled by the Burgundians, Domremy village is the only area that still supports the French royal family. It's not strange that they want to eradicate us. You just happened to run into this matter. Why doesn't your village bow down to the Burgundians? Boss Luo asked curiously. This place is remote enough, even if it's the royal family. I'm afraid they have long forgotten or even never heard of it. In troubled times, you should have a better choice. How can that group of people with Viking barbarian blood be a better choice under their rule? The young girl snorted coldly. The blood of freedom will never be slaves. If I wasn't a girl, I would have left the village long ago and joined the French army to chase this group of barbarians back to their ancestral Navia Peninsula. I've already planned to disguise myself as a man and join the army when I become an adult. Hearing the young girl's firm words, Boss Luo couldn't help but hear a chirp sound in his mind. Janine? Is it your ambition to go to the battlefield and kill the enemy, Miss Jenna? Boss Luo looked into her eyes and asked. The young girl asked in return, Why? Are you looking down on women? Can't women fight the enemy? Of course they can. Boss Luo smiled and said, I'm thinking that on the battlefield, Miss Janine will definitely become an existence like the goddess of victory. Your light will shine on the warriors who follow behind you, and you will become their flag. The young girl's face turned red. How could this person speak like this? All of a sudden, he made it sound so good that it made people dizzy. What did he mean by like a goddess of victory? Become the flag of light. Shameless. The sound of the rapid underground river came, followed by a strong gust of wind. The young girl's face immediately lit up, and she said, We're almost there. Great, we can see the village. It seems that those damn Burgundian cavalrymen haven't arrived yet. Outside of Donnermy village, a soldier said excitedly. Everyone who escaped from Rose Mansion was here. They didn't scatter in the end because Boss Luo took Leon Bell hostage, giving them enough time to hurry. However, K.R. Lily, who lived in the Free City, had never done such high-intensity exercise before. Her face was pale, and she was sweating profusely. Assake's and Laval's breaths were also a bit heavy. Mr. Jacques asked one of the soldiers to hurry to the village office to report the situation. He also asked another soldier to go to the village's sentry post to inform the people who were standing guard at night to sound the horn. He took the rest of the people to meet up with village chief Charles to decide whether to fight the Burgundian cavalrymen or evacuate the villagers as soon as possible. Everyone, although you are witnesses, the Burgundian cavalrymen are attacking our village. Mr. Jacques looked at Assake's and the others and said, So, from now on, I can't take care of you too much. Please stay here and wait. Please forgive me. However, I will try my best to ensure your safety, for the sake of the young man who stepped forward bravely. God, I hope he can come back safely. After saying that, Mr. Jacques hurriedly rushed to meet up with the village chief and the others. How did it become like this? K.R. Lily had just calmed her heartbeat, but when she saw that all the houses in the village lit up after the horn was blown, looking at the terrified village, the maid became even more worried. Boss Assake's, where's this place? Can we still go back to the holy city? The maid's voice had a hint of sobbing. Mr. Assake's could only comfort K.R. Lily softly. At this moment, after Laval settled down the empty Ludic principal and the male assistant, he suddenly came to the maid and Nan Xiaonan. You guys don't seem to be very worried about your companions. We are worried. I'm so worried, Nan Xiaonan said directly. But it's useless to worry now, isn't it? Since the boss isn't here, I'm worried that the future boss's wife will make things difficult for me. Boss, please come back and play the bad guy. I hope he can come back safely. Laval nodded. Unfortunately, I can't pray here, otherwise I would pray for him. Miss Maid suddenly said, Mr. Lavar, don't tell me you can't pray when you can't produce willpower? Lavar couldn't help but be startled as he looked at this beautiful woman in surprise. Those words had a huge impact on him, to the point that he didn't even care whether he had her generate wish energy or produce wish energy. That's right. Laval took a deep breath. Even if I can't obtain willpower, the faith in my heart shouldn't disappear. The saints can't listen to my prayers because I'm not devout enough. After saying that, Mr. Laval closed his eyes. If you only pray for one person in your heart, you don't need to let anyone hear it. The maid's voice suddenly floated. If you really need a place to reach, it must be the river of fate. I hope your prayers can reach the river of fate. Laval's eyelids twitched slightly, but he soon calmed down. Nan Xiaonan didn't know if it was an illusion, but for a moment, she seemed to see a faint light flashing on Laval's body. Assake's walked over after comforting Kay or Lily. After the exploration team brought Mr. Jacques and his team back to the Rose Mansion, they didn't have the time or opportunity to calm down and have a good conversation. Assake's had too many questions in his mind, such as the awakening of Ludic and the male assistant. Lady Nan, how did Ludic and the others wake up? And then how did they become like this? Assake's deliberated and asked. I heard from Kay or Lily that it's because you fed them some potions. I made the potions temporarily. The maid said calmly. There's no clinical trial, so it's not strange that there are such sequelae. What? Mr. Assash's cheeks twitched slightly. If it weren't for the inexplicable awe he felt when facing this woman, he would have scolded her. At this moment, the maid said, Since I made the potions, I'll naturally take responsibility if there's any problem after drinking it. Especially this Ludic. He should be the descendant of the Mother of Saints family, right? I won't let anything happen to him. Everyone in the Holy Light Kingdom was equal, although Mr. Assake's didn't know why she would mention Ludic's background at this moment. He didn't want to hold her accountable. He didn't even dare to look at this beautiful woman in the eye. Damn, when his grandmother was still alive, Her gaze wasn't as majestic as this. Sigh. Mr. Assakes sighed at this time. I don't know when those Burgundian cavalry will come. I'm afraid this place can't resist them. I don't know if we can escape this disaster. And I don't know how Durand is now. The maid suddenly said at this time, there's an underground river nearby. If the village can't resist them, you can hide in the underground river. You can reach the other side of the valley by following the river. Really? Mr. Assakes was overjoyed. He immediately reacted and said in surprise, how do you know? The maid walked directly to Ludic as if she didn't hear it. She opened Ludic's eyes with her fingers and observed his eyes. Assakes could only roll his eyes. This beautiful woman seemed to be indifferent to everyone except for Mr. Luo. She only maintained a polite appearance. I'll go and see if there's anything to eat. Assakes thought at this time. It takes strength to escape. You haven't eaten for a day. Then Seeing this, Nanshaonan quickly said, I seem to have nothing to do. If you don't mind, you can find something to eat and drink with me. Mr. Assakes said helplessly. The light of the torch couldn't reach the other side of the river. Under the only light source, the river was flowing at a terrifying speed. The drop of this underground river should be not small. It was cold all around. The girl was waving the torch at this time, seemingly looking for something. Soon, the girl pulled out a big cloth bag from behind a big rock in the underground river. The girl directly inserted the torch into the ground, and then took out something like animal skin from the big cloth bag, which had been sewn. These are airbags made of animal skin. The girl said quickly, with the buoyancy of the airbags, we can quickly float to the vicinity of the village. I left a net and rope there, which will stop us when we float there. With this, the girl directly blew at the airbags. Only one airbag. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, then it seems that we can only share it. Indeed, there was only one. If they shared it, wouldn't they have to hold each other? Cough, 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 cough. While blowing the airbag, the girl suddenly had a stroke. Chapter 2077. The size of the animal skin airbag was even smaller than an ordinary swimming ring, and it couldn't fit a person. It could only be hugged. Therefore, when it was used on two people, it was inevitable that there would be physical contact. The girl had never been in contact with a strange man. Even if it was a man from the same village, she would at most greet him politely, let alone in this situation. But there was no other choice. If they were to dwell on the issue of physical contact, it was likely to delay their return to the village. Why don't you hold my shoulders tightly? The girl said with a serious face. I have experience in controlling an airbag. It will be more convenient for me to take the lead. Boss Luo thought for a moment and went behind the girl. He hugged the girl from behind and wrapped his hands around her neck. Like this. Chirp. She felt that if she had a tail, it would definitely stand up at this moment, and even the hair on the tail would stand up. The sound in her ear and the feeling of being pressed against her back, it was really, you'd better grab my waist, no, grab my clothes. Waist would be very stimulating. No, waist would be too stimulating. It was a very sensitive place for the girl. She was most afraid of being tickled. It could be a life and death enemy. After doing it several times, Boss Luo finally got into the water with his arms around the girl's slender waist due to her helplessness. The water in the underground river is very cold. If you can't bear it, you must tell me. The girl took a deep breath. This was the instinctive reaction of suddenly jumping into the cold water. Breathing suddenly became difficult. But this symptom quickly subsided after the girl adapted to the temperature of the underground river. She even felt that the water in the underground river today was not as cold as usual. It was like an ordinary river on the surface. Cool? How long will it take to reach the village? Boss Luo asked from behind. At this time, the rapid river water directly pushed the two people's bodies in the direction of the drop. The two sides of the river were winding, and there were even sharp reefs in the river from time to time, but they were easily dodged by the girl's skillful swimming. She had probably used this underground river to travel more than a few times. Very fast, at most 15 minutes. The girl quickly said, Are you okay? With Miss Jean here, I feel very safe. Maybe even sooner. The girl suddenly said, The flow of the underground river today seems to be faster than usual, and the water level seems to have risen a lot. Not good. What happened? If the water level rises, we might not be able to reach the rope and net I placed in front of us. The girl looked alarmed. We will be washed further away. I was too careless. I should have prepared more before entering the water. Boss Luo thought for a moment and said, "How much has the river risen?" The girl quickly observed and said, "He's about 5 meters tall. He might be able to hook the rope with his feet, but there's only one chance. There's still time. We can think of a solution later. There's a forked river in front. One side leads to the village, and the other side leads to a cliff. It is like an underground waterfall. If you are swept to the cliff, you will be in big trouble." Boss Luo couldn't help but ask curiously, "Miss Jana, how did you know there was a cliff on the other side?" I was curious once, so I rushed over there. Fortunately, before I fell, I was caught between the rocks by a tree trunk. After that, I didn't dare to go there again. Miss Jenna is very adventurous. Boss Luo smiled at this time. Yi basically didn't have this kind of spirit. She was used to arranging everything before taking action. She didn't like to have any mistakes in the middle. Her demand for error tolerance was almost infinite. "Are you reminding me that I have a wild temper again?" The girl glared at him. Really, what kind of person was this guy? What kind of situation was this? His life was about to be lost, but he still had the mood to care about such trivial things. "It's foggy," Boss Luo suddenly said. The girl subconsciously said, "Why is the underground river foggy?" "It's really foggy." At this time, the girl looked at the dim river in front of her in disbelief. The torch she raised high could only illuminate the fog in front of her. But it was too late to struggle. There was no possibility of breaking free from the rapid current. The surging underground river instantly sent the two of them into the fog. The girl immediately lost the ability to observe the forks of the river. It seems that there's a strange sound. The girl's expression was solemn. Completely immersed in the fog, it was difficult to even avoid the rocks. Maybe in the next second, they would directly hit those sharp rocks. At this time, in the depths of the fog, there was a sound like a beast's roar. That sound was even more terrifying and horrifying in this desperate situation. There was no time to think. The river quickly washed the two of them to a bright place. There was an orange-red light that appeared on the river in front of them, and it was getting clearer and clearer. Finally, they rushed to the source of the light. What is that, a person? In the middle of the underground river, there were 2 stalagmites stuck to the ground. At this moment, what they saw was a guy whose body was stuck between the 2 stalagmites. The girl had never seen such a style of dressing, and she had never even seen a person's body emitting orange-red light. He was like a monster. Even though he had the appearance of a human, his skin was cracked in many places, and the cracked skin seemed to have magma flowing in it. The river water that quickly brushed past made a sizzling sound, and then released a large amount of water vapor. This was the reason why the fog suddenly appeared in the underground river, because there was a hot guy submerged in the river water. He seems to want to use this method to cool himself down. Boss Luo glanced at him. Maybe there is another reason. "Shoo, let's try not to alarm this weird guy." The girl hurriedly said in a low voice, "Hold on to me. I'll try to go around this weird guy. This weird guy's body can instantly evaporate the river water. If we are scalded, the consequences will be unimaginable." Too late. Boss Luo shook his head. "He found us." "What?" Shocked, the girl hurriedly looked at the weird guy stuck in the middle of the stalagmite. The good guy's tightly closed eyes suddenly opened at this moment, and then the weird guy revealed a smile. That kind of smile that stretched from the corner of the mouth to the root of the ears, revealing terrifying sharp teeth. "Pounce!" The weird guy stuck in the middle of the stalagmite easily climbed up the stalagmite in the middle of the river and then pounced directly at the 2 people who were rushing towards it. Bang! The animal skin airbag was instantly pierced by the weird guy's sharp nails. Without the help of buoyancy, and facing the weird guy close at hand, the girl panicked and was immediately swept into the underground river water. The river water crazily poured into her mouth and nose. But at this moment, her foot seemed to be caught by something. The girl struggled to open her eyes. What she saw was an orange-red glimmer in front of her. That terrifying monster had actually grabbed the girl's ankle in the water. And the weird guy's other hand hooked onto the stalagmite, stabilizing its body in the rapids, and trying to drag the girl out of the water. The girl could only kick the weird guy's arm out of instinct. Mr. Durand. Suddenly, the girl seemed to hear a voice. It was the voice of the guy who was good at swordsmanship, and he seemed to be calling someone's name. But the river water slapped her ears, so she couldn't hear clearly. But the girl felt that the weird guy's hand that grabbed her ankle seemed to be loosening a little. She suddenly exerted all her strength, and finally succeeded in escaping from the weird guy's hand. But the river water suddenly washed her away. At this moment, a figure jumped into the river and hugged the girl tightly. They sank together into the dark river water, and the water under the river was even more chaotic. The girl felt that her body was being rolled, as if she was being dragged into an abyss. She couldn't breathe. She only felt that her body was rapidly falling. Finally, she heavily hit the water again, and the impact had directly knocked her out. She woke up in a scream. She sat up and looked around blankly, but it seemed that she hadn't completely woken up from some kind of chaos. Her eyes unconsciously fell on the Luaccio in front of her, murmuring, "I saw Saint Michael. It gave me guidance." Saint Michael? Where is this? The girl suddenly woke up completely. She shook her head hard and then rubbed her forehead. "What did I say?" "You mentioned the name Saint Michael," Boss Luo said calmly. "Who is Saint Me? Why did I mention his name?" The girl asked with a puzzled look in her eyes. Boss Luo just shook his head, indicating that he didn't know. The girl had to continue rubbing her aching head. "Where are we now? Did you make this fire?" She even showed a look of disbelief. The place in front of her was a platform. This place was still in the underground river, and she could clearly hear the sound of the underground river waterfall. After encountering the weird guy with the orange light, they seemed to have been pushed to another fork. This place was probably a very far place after falling off the cliff. This was a place that the girl hadn't explored before, but she was still curious about how Boss Luo made a fire in this extremely humid place. "Actually, I'm a mage." Boss Luo chuckled and said, "I'm just an apprentice magician. After another 8 years, I can become a real magician. If you're a mage, then I'm a witch." The girl glanced at Boss Luo in annoyance. She thought he was a guy who was fastidious and a little rigid, but didn't lack city people's fancy words. So this guy also knew how to make such a joke? "Miss Rana, can you find a way out from here?" Boss Luo asked casually at this time. The girl's relaxed spirit suddenly tensed up. She looked around and finally shook her head helplessly. "I've never been here before. But if we go up, we should be able to find the way. I hope we haven't been washed far away, or else." The girl knew that it was unrealistic to rush back to the village after being washed to this place. She didn't even know how long she had been unconscious, but looking at the clothes on her body, they were already dry, obviously because of the baking. But this proved that a lot of time had passed. Maybe the village was under attack at this time. "Let's go, let's find the way out." The girl suddenly took a deep breath, patted her cheeks with both hands, and stood up. "We can't just sit here and wait for death." With that, the girl focused her eyes and pointed to a direction in the dim environment. "The terrain here should be up. Let's go in this direction first." "Wait, do you hear something?" Boss Luo said, "I can hear the sound of the underground river waterfall in the distance." "Not this, it's another sound." The girl closed her eyes and listened to something. Then she suddenly took a step forward, but she didn't go in the direction of the higher terrain. It was another direction, the direction of the lower terrain. "It's calling my name." As she took a step forward, the young lady let out a murmur. Her consciousness seemed to be completely drawn in, forgetting everything around her as she walked into the darkness. Boss Luo didn't interrupt the girl's state at this time. He just silently followed behind the girl. Behind them, the sound of the underground river waterfall became softer and softer. The road ahead gradually became narrower, but the river also disappeared unknowingly. They came to a karst cave under a huge rock wall. and the girl continued to go deeper into the cave. Suddenly, the girl stopped and hesitated. Luocio asked at this time, "Why don't you continue walking?" "I don't know." The girl didn't turn back, whispering, "I'm afraid. I don't know what's in front of me. Why is it calling me? Why is it calling me?" Boss Luo said, "Then let's go back." "No, I want to go down. I want to know the answer." The girl took a deep breath. She was very opinionated. Subconsciously, she didn't seem to want to be controlled by this frivolous guy. Even if he was the one chosen by her father, she didn't agree to this marriage. The end of the karst cave seemed to be visible. A dim light appeared in front of them. The girl walked towards this dim light, out of this tunnel. The world suddenly became clear. The legend, is it true? The girl's murmur sounded again. In front of them was a lake emitting light. The light came from the crystals buried in the surrounding rock walls, and there were also crystals emitting light at the bottom of the lake. The girl's gaze was immediately attracted by a shallow beach in the center of the lake. On the shallow beach in the center of the lake, there was a statue of an angel. The angel knelt on the ground with wings folded, and the angel's hands were holding a sword. The sword was inserted into the ground, and the angel also lowered its head. It seemed to be waiting. It also seemed to be repenting. Chapter 2078. On the shallow shore of the lake, the angel statue appeared dim and lifeless. The girl had been staring at this angel statue for a very long time. Boss Luo had been waiting patiently and didn't even disturb them. Mia, the girl suddenly murmured. This was not the first time she said this name. "It's Saint Michael." This time, the girl's voice was more certain. She even took a step forward and walked directly towards the submerged beach in the center of the lake. Even though there was a submerged beach in the center of the lake, there was still a certain depth to the lake before reaching it. She would be completely submerged in the water. Originally, this should be the case. But when the girl touched the lake, a small piece of light condensed under her feet. The light floated on the water and became the girl's foothold. She did not sink into the water. Just like that, she slowly approached the shallow shore at the center of the lake under the condensed brilliance. At this time, Boss Luo thought of the story of Lotus Step by Step, but obviously, the girl was not the one in the story. He also followed the girl to the center of the lake. However, the moment Boss Luo stepped into the light shattered directly, as if it was telling him, "Except for the girl, no one can pass through." "Am I not welcome?" Boss Luo said softly. At this moment, the brilliance behind the girl shattered bit by bit, but it quickly condensed again, forming a new foothold. Boss Luo smiled slightly. "Thank you." He stepped into the new foothold and followed the girl in front of him. Soon, the girl had stepped into the center of the lake and went straight to the angel statue in the center. The angel statue did not look like much from afar, but it was quite tall up close. Even if it was kneeling on one knee, it was still taller than the girl. But the angel statue lowered its head, so it was not easy to see its face. At this time, the girl suddenly did something unexpected. She held the angel statue's face with both hands, as if she wanted to raise its head, but the statue's head was fixed, so it was obviously impossible. Unknowingly, Boss Luo was already beside the girl. He whispered, "Why are you doing this?" She seemed to have suddenly regained some clarity from her dazed state, and her hazy gaze became clearer. "I don't know why either. I just wanted to see what it looked like." Boss Luo thought for a moment and said, since it lowered its head, perhaps it didn't want anyone to see its face. The girl thought for a moment and said, "I can still see it if I bend down." This explanation doesn't seem to make sense. Boss Luo smiled and said, "Under normal circumstances, we won't be able to see it, but bending down means that we're determined to do so." The young girl shook her head. She did not understand why he had to be so particular about these things with a lifeless statue. It was as if there was a living person inside the statue. Even so, she did not think that it was illogical for her to want to lift the statue's face. "Saint Michael," Boss Luo suddenly said. The girl was startled. "You mentioned this name just now. Why did you mention it again? Is this statue the statue of Saint Michael?" "You mentioned it twice, and it was the same thing." Boss Luo glanced at the girl and said something else. It seems that the legend in your village is different from the truth. This angel statue doesn't look like the demon in the lake." "Yes." The girl nodded. "Is this the original form of the demon's sword in the lake?" At this moment, the young girl looked at the angel statue holding the sword that was stabbed into the ground and subconsciously touched it. It looked like an ordinary stone sword. There was nothing special about it. "But I can pick it up," the girl exclaimed in a low voice. The stone sword in the angel statue's hands was easily moved by the girl. She used a little force and pulled the stone sword out of the angel statue's hands. She even waved it twice. The stone sword was heavy in the girl's hand, and she did not feel comfortable swinging it. She shook her head and casually placed the stone sword on the ground. "I can't help but think that the legend of the magic sword that has been circulating in Domremy village could be a story that someone in the village made up to scare children because they accidentally entered this place and saw the lake, the angel statue, and the stone sword. Then it was passed down from generation to generation and became a legend." Miss Gina seems to have grown up listening to this legend. Boss Luo smiled. The girl glared at him and said unhappily, "I thought you were a smart person, but you didn't understand what I meant. What a disappointment." Boss Luo thought for a moment and said, "Miss Gina, since someone accidentally entered this place and made up a story based on what they saw here, it means that there's a way out here. You're not that stupid." The girl chuckled and nodded. "If the person doesn't go back, the story can't be passed down. There must be a way out here." "That's just your guess, Miss Gina," Boss Luo suddenly said. The girl turned around, her eyes bright. "Do you want to embrace hope or be swallowed by despair? I'm afraid this is not a question that can be fooled by all of us." Boss Luo said seriously, "I think Miss Gina can bring hope to people. You're cheerful and you're like the embodiment of hope. So if I choose you, it means I'm embracing hope." "Then wouldn't embracing hope mean I'm embracing?" The girl's expression suddenly became strange, and she quickly turned her head. "This guy is too bad. Father only agreed to the marriage on his own. What does he want to do? Does he want to hug me? No, that can only be done after marriage. No, I haven't agreed yet. Hurry up and find a way out." The girl hurriedly said, "We've wasted too much time. Now is not the time to talk. There will be a chance in the future." "In the future?" "Go over there." The girl pointed in a direction and said angrily, "Don't waste time." Saying this, the young girl raised the stone sword in her hand and headed in another direction. But this time, there was no light to support her body, so she quickly walked into the lake, and the lake water instantly flooded up to her legs. "Strange, how did I come in here?" The girl turned around with a puzzled expression and looked at the bad guy. The bad guy was still in the shallow water in the center of the lake, but its back was facing her, and it was looking forward. "What's wrong?" The girl frowned and looked away. Then her expression changed slightly. "Oh no, this weird thing is chasing us." At the entrance of the cave to this strange underground lake, a figure with cracks on its body was slowly walking toward them. This weird guy stepped directly into the lake and walked toward the shallow water. Its body was still blazing hot. The moment its body entered the lake, it caused the lake water to boil crazily, turning into a thick mist of water vapor. Maybe the legends aren't all made up, the young girl subconsciously thought, but she quickly shook her head to get rid of him. She shouted, "Hurry up and leave. It's catching up. Hey." "It seems that it can't come over," Luaccio suddenly said. The girl didn't believe it. She looked at it subconsciously, only to see that the weird guy was still making the lake water boil crazily, but it seemed that it really couldn't move forward. She wriggled her body in the water and walked up to Luoccio's side step by step. Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, the weird guy began to beat the water crazily, and the sound became louder and louder. At this moment, the girl finally saw that there seemed to be an invisible barrier around the shallow water, and because of the barrier, the weird guy couldn't get close. Is this the power of the angel? The girl subconsciously looked at the angel statue in the center and muttered to herself, "This is a miracle. I saw a miracle. I saw Saint Michael." The weird guy was still beating the invisible barrier crazily, and it didn't hesitate to hit the barrier with its head, and its expression became more and more ferocious and terrifying. Boss Luo said at this moment, "It seems that it won't come over in a short time. But at the same time, we can't get out. We can't stay here forever." The girl shook her head and said, "Even if it's safe here, we will starve to death without real food. Maybe we'll break the barrier one day. Can we only leave this place by defeating this weird guy?" Suddenly, the girl took a deep breath, clenched the stone sword in her hand, and raised it. "Ms. Jenna, what do you want to do?" Boss Luo asked at this moment. "It's the stone statue that led me here." The girl seemed to have returned to that hazy state, and now she put her forehead on the stone sword. "I'm praying to it. The power of the angel blocked the weird guy's entry, and the power of the angel may help me defeat it. Saint Michael, please listen my heart. I, Jenna Dark, am willing to be the sword in your hand. Please give me guidance, give me courage, and give me strength." Boss Luo frowned at this moment. His eyes fell on the angel statue that bowed its head, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. He quickly returned to his original calm state and said in a low voice, "You're not her." At this moment, a ray of light was released from the stone sword and rushed to the sky. The light brought a powerful force. The water in the underground lake was instantly split by the light of the sword. The girl's eyes emitted a horrifying light, and she used her strength to slash down the stone sword in her hand. In an instant, the sword light transformed into a long curtain of light that directly swallowed the blazing monster in the lake. Amidst the light, one could clearly hear the blazing monster's miserable shrieks. The light instantly covered all the crystal lights in the underground lake, as if it had become a world of holy light. After a while, the separated lake water began to gather again, and suddenly became muddy. On the shallow beach, the girl was panting, and she used the stone sword in her hand to support her body. She seemed to have used up too much energy, and her face became extremely pale. At this moment, the stone sword had already concealed its radiance and returned to its ordinary appearance. Success! The girl looked at Boss Luo with surprise and excitement, and said angrily, "I really defeated this monster. It's Saint Michael who gave me this power. Congratulations, Ms. Jenna." Boss Luo smiled faintly. "You've successfully embraced hope." Yes, maybe the joy of defeating the monster filled her heart, but the girl didn't care about the cold attitude of this unofficial betrothed. Maybe he was still in shock, and his heart couldn't calm down, so he couldn't react. Rumble. At this moment, a sound came from the rock wall in front of them, and then the rock wall began to crack. This was the place where the light released by the stone sword hit. A passageway that was neither too big nor too small was exposed after the rock wall was broken. At the same time, a whistling wind blew out from the passageway. The girl was excited. The wind. That means this tunnel can lead to the outside. That's great. Not only did we defeat the monster, but we also found the exit. This must be Saint Michael's arrangement. It's looking after us. Yes. Boss Luo smiled casually. It really seems like it's arranged. Let's get out of here. The girl excitedly walked to Boss Luo's side. She subconsciously grabbed his hand and pulled him into action. "Ms. Jenna, what's wrong?" The girl turned her head. Boss Luo said, "We have to swim over. If you pull me and hold the sword, I'm afraid you'll sink." "You're right." The girl paused and then nodded. She let go of Boss Luo's hand as if she got an electric shock and said with a blushing face, "This is the sword of victory that Saint Michael gave me, and I must take it with me. You swim by yourself. Follow me, and I'll explore the way first." Then the girl tried to walk into the water with the sword. A miraculous scene happened again. The stone sword didn't sink into the water. Instead, it floated on the surface of the lake and pulled the girl to the edge of the lake. Boss Luo narrowed his eyes as he looked at the surprised girl, who kept looking at the stone sword at the edge of the lake. "Come here quickly. Don't just stand there." The girl suddenly waved her hand and shouted. Boss Luo nodded and walked into the water. But at this moment, the water level of the lake started to drop rapidly, and even formed a huge whirlpool. The lake water started to flow into the whirlpool, and the water level crazily dropped. After a short while, the entire underground lake was drained. Boss Luo walked to the edge of the lake calmly. This must be a gift from Saint Michael. The girl looked at Boss Luo, who walked to her and couldn't help but mutter to herself. Since it's a gift, it must want you to return to the village as soon as possible. Boss Luo said casually, Ms. Jenna, let's go. You're right. The girl nodded. Looking at the girl's confident manner, she directly rushed into the passage created by the impact of the light. Boss Luo suddenly looked back at the angel statue in the center of the lake. I'm starting to hate this place. Crack. Instantly, a long and thin crack appeared on the back of the angel statue in the center of the lake. At this moment, Luochio casually glanced at the bottom of the lake where the water was drained. He stretched out his hand and snapped his fingers before turning around and walking into the tunnel. At the bottom of the lake where the water was drained, a hand suddenly reached out from the mud. There were many cracks on the arm. The cracks were like flowing lava, emitting a blazing aura in all directions. Freedom City, in front of an office building in a bustling commercial area, 3 faint lights quietly landed on the rooftop of the building. They were the white-clothed young man and the 2 high-level angels. The female angel quickly said, according to Dr. Hank's Destiny Diary, the merchant who sells imported drugs works in this building. The white-clothed young man nodded calmly and was about to speak. Suddenly, his face slightly changed. His face instantly turned pale, and then he spat out a mouthful of golden blood. Master, the 2 high-level angels were instantly terrified and shocked. Chapter 2079. They had always followed the white-clothed youth to conquer the subworlds of different realms and spread the glory of the Lord. In their hearts, the white-clothed youth's existence was perhaps even higher. At this moment, seeing the white-clothed youth suddenly spit out a mouthful of blood, how could the 2 high-level angels not be shocked? My lord, what happened? Did Taoist Lu Ya's sneak attack when we were conquering the Westar subworld relapse? The female angel was so anxious that she accidentally revealed the defeat of the Heaven Army at the front line. On that day, the Heaven Army was attacked by the Sovereign Organization of the Transcendents, causing a large scale of damage to the Heaven Army. Later, the glory of the Lord shone, and the attackers were repelled. After receiving the news, the Archangel who was in charge of the Heaven Army immediately pulled back the front line and returned to the Heaven Army with his personal guards. The Archangel had returned as soon as she received the news and immediately restored order to the chaotic Heaven Sanctum. However, even the other seraphim did not know that the Archangel had once suffered a hidden loss in the development of a certain subworld. The Archangel returned to the Heaven Army for 2 reasons. On one hand, he wanted to shock the crazy Transcendents, and, on the other hand, he wanted to recover from his injury. However, this was an extremely confidential matter, and only the high-level angels who were close to the Archangel knew about it. The male angel Londo and the female angel were 2 of them. When the Archangel was attacked that day, just like now, he spat out a mouthful of blood. That was a very dangerous subworld. Under the joint management of the Heavenly Court and Buddhism, it was like an iron bucket, and not even a drop of water could leak out. The Archangel had planned for a long time, hoping to use that subworld as a breakthrough point to spread the glory of the Lord in the many subworlds controlled by the Heavenly Court and Buddhism. As long as he spread a little seed of glory, the seed would grow into a big tree one day. However, he did not expect that a Taoist who called himself Luya would appear and use a strange weapon that caught people off guard. Supreme Order, function stop. Facing the panicked and worried gazes of the 2 high-level angels, the white-clothed youth suddenly spat out a sentence. In an instant, the eyes of the 2 high angels lost their luster. They even stood up. Not only that, but they also knelt on one knee. Their chests split open from their waists, and their heads split open from their jaws. After their bodies split open, the 2 high-level angels were like half-disintegrated bodies. They didn't move at all. Only two different light balls were floating on their split chests. The white-clothed youth took a deep breath at this moment. He stroked his chest and felt that his breathing had become much smoother, but his expression was still not very good. The golden bloodstains on the ground were wiped away by him with a wave of his hand. Is it really Luya? The young man in white subconsciously frowned. It was true that he was ambushed and injured, but it was not a serious injury. The injury should have been treated before he returned to the heavenly kingdom. Could it be that the strange flying knife has some special ability? The young man in white couldn't help but ponder. After pondering for a while, the result was, it doesn't seem like it. However, since the war with Satan the Great, this was the only time he was injured and vomited blood. If it wasn't for the strange methods of those so-called Eastern immortals, who could it be? The young man in white had no clue at this moment. Even when he was ambushed by Taoist Luya's strange flying knife, he could still sense it in advance with a sense of touch that surpassed the world. He could even directly find the attacker's body in the fog. However, this time, not to mention finding the attacker's hiding place. He didn't even sense it beforehand. Even if the Lord wanted to punish him, it was impossible for him not to have a bad feeling about it. After all, the methods of the Eastern immortals have too many strange and uncertain factors. The young man in white slowly exhaled. He knew that not only the Eastern immortals, but those Buddhas of the Buddhist sect had even stranger methods. They could even use the power of karma. Even so, the young man in white still didn't look good. Anyone who knew that there might be hidden injuries in their body that were hard to find would have a bad expression. The young man in white didn't even know if this hidden injury would flare up or when it would flare up next time. If it suddenly flared up in a battle between high-end combat forces, the consequences would be unbearable. Maybe I should take this opportunity to go to Maria's city. The young man in white muttered to himself. That Holy Mother had the power of redemption and could heal any injuries. The high-level angels' bodies began to fit together again little by little. After that, the cracks on their bodies gradually disappeared as if nothing had happened. The female angel's voice was crisp at this moment. According to Dr. Hank's destiny log, the businessman who sells imported drugs works in this building. Then, let's go directly to him. The young man in white nodded indifferently and then said, "Let's be direct. Don't waste time here." The female angel and Angel Long looked at each other. The young man in white's attitude before was quite slow. He wanted to find the culprit slowly and wasn't in a hurry. Now, it seemed that he was quite impatient. However, despite the doubts in their hearts, they would try their best to carry out the order of this young man in white. Any order. There was no moon and few stars. The stars and the moon were covered by thick clouds. This night was much quieter and darker than the nights that the young girl had experienced before. However, the young girl wasn't depressed at this moment. On the contrary, she was happy and excited, as if she was bathed in the light of blessing. The fire of hope in her heart was burning passionately. She even felt that her chest was blazing hot. A warm feeling flowed through her body, making her fearless of the dampness and desolation of the night. The young girl greedily breathed in the fresh air. They had successfully passed through the broken tunnel and returned to the surface. "Do you see that windmill? That's the windmill on my farm," the young girl exclaimed with a trace of disbelief. "I never thought that there would be a road leading to the underground lake near my home. Legend has it that it's so close." "If it's a legend that's close to you, it's just a story." Boss Luo smiled casually at this time. Looking at the situation, those cavalrymen shouldn't be here yet. The young girl nodded. Indeed, although the lights are on in the village, it looks quiet. If it was attacked, it wouldn't be like this. The Burgundian cavalrymen always set fires. Those cruel and inhumane fellows. Boss Luo said at this time. The village seems to be on alert. Mr. Jacques and the others should have returned with the news. "Miss Jenna, this place is so close to your farm. I suggest you go home first." "Why?" The young girl looked at the fiancé that her father had promised her with puzzlement. "I can help to fight against those cavalrymen. I even have the power of the sword of victory. I can defeat them." With the support of divine power and this sword of victory in her hand, the young girl named the stone sword the Sword of Victory. Under this effect, she was unprecedentedly confident. She even felt that she was stronger than an adult, especially an adult man. Boss Luo saw this. In fact, he actually summed up the young girl's state as, she was arrogant. Of course, I don't mean to deny Miss Jenna's power. Boss Luo smiled and said, but I think as a father, Mr. Jacques wouldn't want to know that his daughter had secretly followed him all the way and even went through the underground river passage and the underground lake. So many adventure stories. The young girl stuck out her tongue subconsciously. No matter how arrogant she was still a young girl in her teens. The majesty of her father was a monster that confidence could not defeat. The young girl immediately pulled Boss Luo's sleeve and said with a slightly red face, will you help me keep this a secret? A secret between the two of us. Boss Luo stared at the young girl for a long time. The young girl was a little nervous. You don't want to? Boss Luo suddenly smiled and said, Miss Jenna looks cuter like this. I'll go home first. The young girl lowered her head, tightly holding Sword of Victory in her arms, and rushed out. I'll go to the village after changing my clothes. Wait for me. Seeing the young girl's figure getting farther and farther away, Boss Luo also walked toward the village at this time. On the windmill, not far away, there was a pair of eyes quietly sizing up the two separated figures on the ground, until the two figures on the ground also disappeared from the line of sight. The windmill was slowly turning, and the owner of the line of sight was sitting on the highest railing, gently swinging her little feet. A young girl. There seemed to be something like cream stuck to her chubby little face and the aroma of desserts. The scenery here is really good. Suddenly, a voice came out from the silence. It was Boss Luo's voice. She was sitting on the railing and swinging her little feet. Like a frightened little animal, she panicked and fell from the railing. She was about to fall under the windmill. This place was really high. But soon, the little girl who was supposed to fall off the windmill slowly rose up, or rather, she floated up. Behind her back, there was a pair of small palm-sized wings that were flapping vigorously. The little girl looked as if she was being lifted up by someone by the back of her clothes. She rotated horizontally in midair, adjusting her body. Soon, the little girl saw the bad guy who suddenly spoke behind her and scared her. The little girl widened her eyes, and her chubby cheeks puffed up. This should be the second time we've met. Luo Chiu walked closer at this time and looked at the angry little girl with a chuckle. The little girl snorted and then turned her face away. She even raised her hands, looking like she wouldn't forgive him if he didn't apologize. Did I scare you? Boss Luo said softly. The little girl snorted again. This time, she turned her face to the other side and raised her chin. But you've been peeping at us, haven't you? Boss Luo said again. The little girl didn't turn her face away, but her eyes turned. Then let's treat it as a tie. What do you think? Boss Luo asked with a smile. The little girl turned her face around, pulled her eyelids with her fingers, stuck out her tongue, and made a face. After that, the little girl floated backward. After floating for a short distance, the little girl soon disappeared into thin air. Boss Luo didn't chase after her. He just walked closer to the railing. He pressed his hands on the railing and looked at the lights of Donremy village not far away. He muttered to himself, so, it was painted here. From here, the Dong Remy village in front of him looked exactly like the landscape painting where the Rose Mansion had disappeared. She was at the place where she stored the tools used to climb the walls. Young girl Jean. However, when she climbed back to her room in the farm, she found that the door was open. At this moment, there was no one in the big house. Even the servants were gone. The young girl sighed with regret. Perhaps after the warning horns sounded in the village, her family came to find her, but couldn't find her in the room. In the end, they could only go to the village to meet her. Perhaps her father already knew that she wasn't at home. Forget it. She would just say that she couldn't sleep at night and went out for a walk. Anyway, as long as she didn't say anything, her father wouldn't know what she experienced last night. After making up her mind, the girl found a set of clean clothes and took it into the bathroom. If she appeared dirty, with her father's shrewdness, he would definitely guess something. Sword of Victory. She couldn't bring the sword in. Wouldn't that be disrespectful to Saint Michael? The young girl put Sword of Victory on the bed. Soon, there was the sound of washing in the bathroom. At this moment, a light flashed in the empty room, a small ball of light. Then, the ball of light disappeared, and a chubby little girl quietly floated in the young girl's room. The little girl carefully looked at the bathroom and saw the Sword of Victory on the bed. She was overjoyed and rushed to the Sword of Victory without saying a word. She held the hilt with both hands and wanted to lift it up. However, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't lift Sword of Victory at all. She really tried her best. She even used all the strength she got from eating the cream cake in the middle of the night. She still couldn't lift it up. Finally, under the continuous force, the little girl suddenly deflated. She was like a deflated balloon, collapsing on the bed in an instant. The young girl Jean seemed to have finished washing and was about to come out. Seeing this, the little girl quickly turned around and crawled under the bed. After washing up, she only put on a thin nightgown with nothing inside. Her hair was simply washed, but because it was short, it was dry after a casual wipe. She lay on the bed and stretched her body. When her arm touched Sword of Victory, she suddenly sat up and raised Sword of Victory with both hands. She muttered to herself, "I'm the light of victory. I'm the guide of light." So embarrassing. The young girl covered her face. No, change it. I'm the pure white flame messenger. Ah, it's still too embarrassing. Change it. At this moment, the young girl suddenly felt a sharp pain coming from her ankle. It was like she was bitten by something, and the pain made her quickly jump up. However, when she lay down, she didn't find anything under the bed. Strange, this bite mark doesn't look like a rat's. The young girl frowned. While she was puzzled, the door was suddenly pushed open, and a woman in her 30s looked surprised and happy. "Miss, you're finally back. Where did you go? We searched everywhere but couldn't find you. Everyone in the house had gone to the village. Madam asked me to wait for you here. I was afraid, so I hid. I just heard a voice upstairs. I've finally been waiting for you, Miss Jenna. I went for a walk." The young girl's expression was stiff. Okay, it's a walk, right? I got it." The maid shook her head at this time, then quickly walked into the room, and then skillfully took out the clothes from the cabinet in the room. She even found a wig with long hair and threw it on the bed. "Hurry up and change your clothes. Master is waiting for you in the village." I got it. Chapter 2080. The name of the pharmacist was no longer important. Under the command of the white-clothed young man, Angel Londo walked into the office of the pharmacist. "Who are you? I don't think I know you. What do you want?" Londo was shocked. Anyone would be shocked to see a guy without a mouth barging into their office. Accept the judgment of the holy light, lost sheep. Angel Londo murmured in his mind and reached out to grab the destiny diary of the pharmacist. After that, the white-clothed young man, accompanied by the female angel, walked directly into the office. Angel Londo quickly handed the destiny diary to the white-clothed young man. The white-clothed young man didn't sit down, but opened the diary to read. After a while, the white-clothed young man frowned. He closed the diary and said in a deep voice, "Nothing. My lord, what is it?" The white-clothed young man said expressionlessly, "This pharmacist is the same as Dr. Hank. There's nothing in the destiny diary about this type of prohibited drug. He only treats this drug as a legitimate drug and imports it from the City of Dawn at a low price." The female angel frowned. "Do we have to find the manufacturer of this drug? The City of Dawn? Are we going to the City of Dawn next?" The white-clothed young man thought for a moment and said, "The City of Freedom's account book needs to be checked. I came for this matter. Now that I'm delayed because of the prohibited drug, you stay here and check for me. I'll take Londo to the City of Dawn." Then, the white-clothed young man waved his hand, and a beam of holy light shot into the female angel's body and formed a special golden mark on her forehead. "When the saint of the City of Freedom sees you, he'll know that you're my emissary. Go." "Yes, my lord." The female angel turned around and left respectfully. The white-clothed young man glanced at Angel Londo and said calmly, "Come with me. Your punishment will be suspended for now. We'll deal with you after we leave the Holy Light Kingdom." Angel Londo's mouth that had disappeared appeared again. It was uncomfortable not being able to speak, and he felt much better now. Angel Londo looked delighted. "Thank you, my lord. I'll be more careful with my words in the future. Shall we head to the City of Dawn now?" The young man in white pondered for a moment and said coldly, "No, let's go to Maria first. The city of Maria, the city of the one known as the Holy Mother." Langdo was startled. He vaguely thought of something, but his mind was blank. There was no memory to support this faintly discernible inspiration. However, he didn't dare to ask too much and only responded respectfully. After the female angel left the office building, she arrived at the saint's residence in the Freedom City. Originally, this female angel planned to meet the saint of the Freedom City directly, but she didn't expect the saint to be discussing the art of painting with a few artists. The female angel had already given a hint, but the saint of the City of Freedom delayed until an hour later. Only then did he end the art salon in a hurry and arrive. After all, the saint of the Freedom City was recognized by the Lord of the Kingdom of Heaven, and he was a holy existence on the same level as the seraphim. Even though she was a little dissatisfied, the female angel didn't show any disrespect after seeing this saint. Even though she had the mark of the white-clothed young man on her, and was his representative, she was even more respectful toward him. The saint in front of her was a great existence who had a holy angel legion in the kingdom of heaven. The holy angel legion was called Wings of Freedom, and even the archangel who ruled over all the angels couldn't directly mobilize it. The Wings of Freedom had been guarding a subworld that was extremely important to the kingdom of heaven, and they wouldn't be mobilized easily. However, the Wings of Freedom, his combat strength was in the top 3 of all the angel legions in the kingdom of heaven. Once they were mobilized, it would be a world-destroying war. The saint in front of her was the owner of the Freedom City of the Holy Light Kingdom, and he was also the general of the Wings of Freedom in the kingdom of heaven. He was a great existence who was comparable to the young man in white, and she didn't dare to act presumptuously in front of the saint. Why didn't he come personally? Instead, he sent you here alone? In front of the female angel, the saint leaned lazily on the reclining chair and looked at her with a cold expression. The female angel didn't dare to neglect and quickly said, "Saint, my lord has some other things to deal with, so he sent me here to investigate the account of the Freedom City as willpower." "Other things?" The saint looked surprised and asked curiously, "What else is more important than the investigation? Is it the Dawn City rebelling, or is it more direct? Is it the blazing Sky City as internal division?" The female angel's expression couldn't help but change slightly. What this sage said was already one of the most taboo things in the entire kingdom of heaven. Even if you are a saint personally appointed by the Lord, you can't be so unscrupulous. "I don't know." The female angel had to think carefully and said, "My lord didn't say anything to me, so I can't make wild guesses." "He didn't tell you?" The saint chuckled and said calmly, "In that case, that guy probably didn't treat you as his confidant." The female angel took a deep breath and said, "My lord treats all of us equally. If he didn't tell me, there must be some other reason. I believe in him. What a loyal subordinate." The saint smiled and narrowed his eyes. "What's your name?" "Angel Jerubel." Then, the saint's smile grew wider. "Angel Jerubel, I wonder if you're interested in joining my Wings of Freedom Legion? I like loyal guys like you." The female angel. Angel Jerubel looked up in surprise, and many thoughts flashed through her mind. Finally, she said slowly, "Saint, if I join your Wings of Freedom so easily, I won't be the loyal guy you like anymore." The saint didn't deny it and lightly nodded. Then he lazily flicked his hair and pointed with his finger. On the floor of the room, a tall bookcase appeared in an instant. The saint changed into a more comfortable position on the reclining chair, yawned, and waved his hand. "It's all here. Take a look at it yourself. I'm going to take a nap." "Take a nap here?" Angel Jerubel looked at the saint in disbelief. Although there had always been rumors that the saint was somewhat independent, this situation was really rare. In the end, Angel Jarabi took a deep breath and forced himself to look at the saint who seemed to be asleep. Then, he slowly walked to the bookshelf that was filled with books. Angel Jerubel, your body is also very beautiful. Suddenly, she heard the saint's words. She, who had just taken out a book from the bookcase, was so shocked that she didn't even know how to respond. She subconsciously turned around. Before her eyes, the sage had appeared behind her at some point. Saint, you are. Angel Jerubel was shocked at this time. The saint directly reached out his hand and lifted Angel Jerubel's chin. He directly pressed his red lips on her lips. At the same time, the holy light mark on her forehead suddenly jumped as if it was burning. But at this time, a cold energy suddenly covered this holy light mark, and the restlessness of the holy light mark gradually calmed down. Angel Jerubel's eyes widened, and all his thoughts almost stopped because of this saint's sudden action. Stopped. Angel Jerubel was completely stopped. She even lost the ability to think. She slumped to the ground like a pile of mud. Her eyes even became hollow. The sage lowered his gaze and looked at the doll-like body. Unfortunately, it's just an angel's body. The saint slowly wiped his lips at this time and chuckled. It's a bit wasteful. After that, the saint slowly walked back to the reclining chair, laid down again, and pondered. I need help, she suddenly said. She was making a decision that even she thought was crazy, and she didn't hesitate at all. If I don't want to be a puppet, then I can only choose to save myself. Why can't all of this belong to me? Writing in the void. A golden page full of words quickly formed. The moment it was formed, the page began to burn. She watched until the end of the burning before she slowly exhaled. In the distant void, in one of the subworlds that were as numerous as quicksand in the river, in a hidden world, there were flags of wings of liberty everywhere. The angels here even lived with humans. The holy gospel here would be spread with the wind. This was the real origin of her. They were also called holy angels. They had unique golden wings. They were the embodiment of holy light in this world. Even miracles could be seen everywhere. Every human here was qualified or was the most devout believer. In the hidden world, in a remote and quiet village under the rule of the French dynasty of human society, several holy angels were pulling up their sleeves and waving hoes while weeding. The villagers next to them were in fear and trepidation. How could they let the embodiment of holy light do such heavy work? However, these holy angels insisted, and the villagers couldn't do anything about it. Mr. Bertrand, please take a break. You must return the rest to us. As holy angels, you can't do all the work of sowing seeds. The fruit that you plant is the sweetest. Among the holy angels, a handsome young man laughed heartily and said, It's okay to work by yourself. In our Wings of Liberty Legion, our commander even cooks, washes, and cleans his own house. They felt like they had heard some great gossip. The villagers opened their mouths. Let's take a break first. The villagers had to force themselves to say, Oh, okay. You insist. The holy angel named Bertrand nodded with a smile. Then he looked at his holy angel companions behind him and said, Let's go over there. There's sweet spring water there. With that, the group of holy angels spread their golden wings and flew into the sky. The villagers weren't surprised. They were used to it because the holy angels flew in the sky every day. When they saw that humans needed help, they would take the initiative to land. Come on, we have to finish the rest of the work quickly. A leader of the villagers quickly said, Otherwise, when the holy angels come back, they will steal our work again. Laziness is a sin. We can't become lazy people because of this. The villagers went to work. On the other side, Bertrand and a few holy angels slowly landed beside spring. In an instant, the sound of wind and laughter came from the forest. It was the laughter of the little elves in the forest. But at this moment, a flame that looked like a red lotus suddenly appeared above the spring. The group of holy angels instantly withdrew their relaxed expressions. It's a handwritten order from a saintess, Holy Angel Bertrand said in a deep voice. He slowly walked toward the red lotus fire. In the flame, A golden page slowly floated out and finally fell into the hands of Holy Angel Bertrand. Is it really a handwritten order from the Saintess? Another holy angel said in surprise. The Saintess is in the Holy Light Kingdom. She hasn't given us a handwritten order for a long time. I thought the Saintess had forgotten about us. What are you talking about? Holy Angel Bertrand glared back. Think about the consequences if the Saintess heard you. With the temperament of the Saintess, she would at most let me clean for a month. The holy angel said with a chuckle, if it doesn't work at most, I would be hung up to dry my tears. It's not a big deal. Be serious. Holy Angel Bertrand suddenly put on a stern face. However, in his opinion, this level of stern face didn't have much effect. He sighed helplessly. The Saintess hasn't returned to the wings of liberty for a long time. Look at how sloppy these guys are now. Okay, let's be serious. Even if we can't accept the handwritten order from the Saintess, we still have to give face to Commander Bertrand. So, what did the Saintess' handwritten order say? Holy Angel Bertrand rolled his eyes and began to carefully read the contents of the page. After a while, Holy Angel Bertrand's expression changed. He really became solemn. It seems that it's a very important matter. Seeing this, the smiles on the holy angels' faces gradually faded. They became serious. Bertrand, what did the handwritten order say? Holy Angel Bertrand said with a serious expression. The Saintess wants us to choose the 10 most powerful holy angels in the wings of liberty and enter the Holy Light Kingdom to see her. Hashtag PS1. Happy birthday to Big Boss Wudo. PS2. I can only make a gift. PS3. 0/1. As usual. Chapter 2081. In Dong Remy Village, all the villagers had been mobilized. The villagers came out one after another, fully armed. Although they were fully armed, they had only used everything that could be used at home. For example, they used stewing pots as helmets, or used winter clothes to bind their hands and feet. The men picked up ironware, and the women picked up rolling pins or kitchen knives. It seemed that the villagers were quite experienced in this kind of situation. Although they seemed to be in a hurry, they didn't panic. In this kind of situation, Assex found that it was quite easy to find food because the villagers' houses were all open and many houses were empty at this time. The villagers had already gathered. With this much, it should be enough. At this time, Mr. Assex touched the spoils in his hand, looked at Nan Xiaonan, and said, "Let's go back first, Lady Nan." Okay, Nan Xiaonan nodded. On the way to find food, Nan Xiaonan and Assex didn't talk much. Mr. Assex seemed to have a lot on his mind. At this time, because they found enough food, he looked a little better, but only a little better. Boss Assex, are you worried about that Ludic principal? Nan Xiaonan asked tentatively at this time. I heard that you have a good relationship since you were young. Bad relationship. Assex said straightforwardly and seriously. Nan Xiaonan immediately said, the sage should have said that we should get along well, love, and help each other. No, the sage didn't say this. Either you've remembered it wrongly, or you've interpreted the holy words wrongly. Mr. Arthas said sternly. Either you've remembered it wrongly, or your interpretation of the holy words is wrong. Nan Xiaonan was speechless. How did she know whether the sage said it or not? Usually he would say it. Since he was a sage, wouldn't he preach? Maybe. I remembered it wrong. Nan Xiaonan could only smile awkwardly and say, it should be the saints of the other 7 capitals who said something similar. Assex did not refute this time. The reason for this was very simple. He was not familiar with the other 7. Was it a lie? Nan Xiaonan observed Assash's expression. This time, she carefully considered her words before slowly saying, Boss Assex, what do you plan to do if we can't leave this place? Assex said, then we can only continue to live here. We can't commit suicide. If we commit suicide, our souls won't be able to ascend to heaven. Even if we're in a dangerous place, we have to stay strong and survive. But here, you can't even pray to obtain the power of will. Nan Xiaonan quickly said, I just took a look, and I found that the people in this village don't seem to have much faith. In fact, Assex had also found it. He had roughly looked around the village, but he couldn't find a place like a church. Even when he sneaked into the houses to look for food, he didn't find any convenient prayer facilities in the houses. This may be a place with poor faith. Mr. Assakes said thoughtfully, "When I was young, when I traveled with my teacher, I heard that there would be some places with poor faith. Even the holy light of the 7 capitals couldn't shine on them." What if this place is not even the Holy Light Kingdom? Nan Xiaonan suddenly asked. "You're more worried about your own situation, Miss Nan." The Arthakis boss suddenly looked at her. Nan Xiaonan blinked her eyes in surprise. She didn't mind that her intentions had been seen through. What she was surprised about was that Boss Shatha's line of thought seemed to be somewhat inconsistent with the main theme of the entire Holy Light Kingdom. How should she say it? If every resident of the Holy Light Kingdom was a model human with an almost perfect personality, then Mr. Assakes was obviously the imperfect one. Or he had some defects? Is there anything wrong with that? Nan Xiaonan said, "Of course I will think about my own safety, and when danger comes, the first thing I will think about is myself. This is human nature, human instinct. What's wrong with that?" Mr. Assakes shook his head and said, "Human nature is kind. It shouldn't be selfish." Nan Xiaonan said disapprovingly, "Now I want to kill you, or Kay or Lily. Only one of you can survive. Who do you want it to be? Don't hesitate. What's the answer in your heart?" Of course, Mr. Assakes opened his mouth, but the moment he opened his mouth, he couldn't say the answer in his heart. He was shocked to find that he couldn't produce an answer in his heart. "Your question is not valid." Mr. Assakes finally shook his head. "You don't have a reason to kill me, or Kay or Lily, because we are now in the same difficult situation. We need to help each other to have the possibility of getting out of this difficult situation." "So," Nan Xiaonan chuckled and said, "Mr. Assakes, you are avoiding my question, because you may have hesitated in your heart." "I haven't." Mr. Assakes took a deep breath and said seriously, "I firmly believe that the saint will definitely appear in the midst of despair, bringing us hope and dispelling fear. So, what you are thinking is not valid." "You firmly believe? What makes you so sure?" Nan Xiaonan smiled coldly and said, "In this place you can't even pray, right? How would the saint know that you are in trouble?" "Of course it's because." Mr. Assakes opened his mouth and then closed it. "Because of what?" Nan Xiaonan suddenly narrowed her eyes. Mr. Assakes said indifferently, "The saint won't give up anyone who believes in her." "You worry too much, Lady Nan." He actually restrained himself from saying something out of impulse, as expected of an old man, an old scheming boy. Nan Xiaonan shrugged her shoulders, then suddenly pointed to the front and said with a smile, "Now, let's see if the saint you speak of, Mr. Arthakis, will not give up on any of his believers." Mr. Assakes frowned doubtfully and looked at the direction where Nan Xiaonan pointed. Outside the village, on the road in the field, something was rapidly approaching. It was a dark mass of people. "Seems like cavalry?" Mr. Assakes couldn't help but turn pale with fright. "Father." On the other side of Donnermy village, the girl easily met up with Mr. Jacques under the guidance of the family's maid. At this time, Mr. Jacques was discussing the cavalry's attack with village chief Charles and several other village representatives. They thought that the cavalry would attack soon, but after waiting for most of the night, there was still no movement outside the village. The village chief and the others naturally didn't doubt Mr. Jacques' intelligence. After all, this was something that several village militias could prove besides Mr. Jacques. They were only puzzled about the cavalry's absence. This wasn't a good thing because fear and uneasiness would continue to expand with time. Perhaps this group of Burgundian cavalry was waiting for the villagers to be exhausted because of nervousness before attacking and destroying them in one fell swoop. Perhaps the cavalry's real goal wasn't the village, but they were just passing by and actually had other missions. There were many different opinions, and there was no unified statement. Gradually, there was even a trend of quarreling. At this time, Mr. Jacques sighed, rubbed his eyebrows, and temporarily left the discussion. He came to the door of the meeting room and looked at his daughter. He straightened his face and said, "Jahan, you should know that there is a limit to my tolerance for you." The girl bowed her head and apologized. She knew that her father liked this. As long as she bowed her head and apologized, she could always hit her father's weak spot. Usually, you are willful and mischievous, but this time, you can't be easily forgiven. Mr. Jacques' anger was quite big today, and there was even a tendency that it couldn't be extinguished. The girl was calculating in her heart. Mr. Jacques said directly, "Your mother said that it is time to find you a husband. After you get married, you will become more mature. I have always felt that you are still young and shouldn't decide on marriage so quickly. But now, it seems that it is necessary to find you a good husband." The girl looked up at her father in surprise, and her heart was suddenly enlightened. Her father was probably using this opportunity to reveal some information to her, so that when the young man who stepped forward in the mansion safely returned to fulfill the marriage contract, he could pave the way for her, right? He was obviously facing his own daughter, so why did he have to be so scheming? Although she had some complaints in her heart, the girl surprisingly didn't refute Mr. Jacques at this time. She just lowered her head and looked pitiful. At this time, Mr. Jacques was also surprised that his daughter didn't refute. Logically speaking, with his daughter's character, she should have argued for it. Why did it seem like she acquiesced? Forget it. It's not necessarily a bad thing for his daughter to be obedient. At least when that brave young man returns safely, he can fulfill his promise. "Father, let's talk about my matter later." The girl looked up at this time and said, "What is the situation in the village now? We have temporarily arranged the retreat route." Mr. Jacques said worriedly, "But once the cavalry attack, with our speed, I am afraid that it won't take long for them to catch up. Originally, the sooner we retreat, the better, but the people inside are arguing nonstop and haven't made up their minds. They're still fantasizing that perhaps they can give up their wealth and let the cavalry plunder it in exchange for safety. Humph! Last time they set fire to the village. This time they dare to kill people with swords. Father, I have a way to protect everyone's safety." At this time, a flash of light flashed in the girl's eyes, and she quickly said, "I know a place, very secret and spacious enough to hide." "Oh!" Mr. Jacques was stunned at first. Then he was overjoyed. "Where is it?" The girl quickly mentioned that not far behind their farm, there was a secret passage that could lead to an underground lake and an underground river. "That was one time when I was hunting nearby, chasing a prey, and accidentally found it." "Hunting again?" Mr. Jacques stared and then shook his head. "But it was a coincidence. If what you said is true, then this time the village may be able to survive the danger safely. Without further ado, I will discuss this matter with Charles and the others immediately. You wait for me outside. When I need you, I will call you in and explain. You can say that you found it when you were lost while walking." "Got it," the girl murmured and then immediately said, "By the way, Father, why didn't I see those outsiders who left with you in the afternoon? Didn't they come back?" Mr. Jacques briefly explained what had happened. "Except for that brave young man, the rest of the people have come back. That young man was really brave. If it weren't for him, I'm afraid that I would have died under the sword of the cavalryman. If he can come back safely, you must thank him. Do you understand?" The girl was a bit absent-minded at this time. "Still not back? It shouldn't be. I have already gone home first, and even changed my clothes before entering the village. Why hasn't that person come back yet? Or, he has already returned to the village, but hasn't come back yet. Instead, he met up with his companions first? Where are those outlanders now?" the girl suddenly asked. Mr. Jacques casually pointed at a house in front, and when he was about to speak, a voice called him from the meeting room. It sounded quite excited. "You wait for me here. Don't go anywhere," Mr. Jacques hurriedly said, and then returned to the room. The girl quietly stuck out her tongue at this time, lifted the long skirt that hindered her movement, and directly turned around and left. Miss K. Lily of the Rose Mansion was now using the feather duster to drive away mosquitoes for Mr. Ludick and the male assistant. This was the only thing she could do. K. Lily was now looking at Miss Yu Yi, who was sitting on the table and writing something with awe. She had already written many sheets of white paper, and now neatly stacked them aside. They were all formulas and names that K. Lily couldn't understand at all. Something about the purity of belief, something about the benchmark of souls, and a lot of other things. "Ha! Yes." Miss Maid even yawned at this time and was about to fall asleep. At this time, the door outside the room was suddenly pushed open by someone. Kate or Lily was so shocked that she didn't feel sleepy at all, and even directly stood up and then held the feather duster in front of her to protect her body. Then she found that she was holding it upside down, so she turned it around again and continued to protect her body. At the door, she saw a 14 or 15 years old beautiful girl with long blonde hair wearing a dress. Kate or Lily's tense heart was slightly relaxed, and she subconsciously asked, "Who are you?" "Jahan." The girl in front of the door directly said her name, and then frowned. "Only you are here. This room is only so big. Miss, will your eyesight be affected at night?" The one who responded was Miss Maid. At this time, Miss Maid was still writing a lot of things that Kay or Lily couldn't understand. She didn't raise her head. The girl in front of the door couldn't help but frown again. She looked at the woman who was concentrating on writing something and couldn't help but think in her heart, "She is a strong opponent." Why did the atmosphere feel a little strange? The maid of the Rose Mansion quietly shrank in the corner. She just remembered that her feather duster was still raised, so she quickly put it down and showed an awkward but polite smile. But neither the girl in front of the door called Jahan nor the maid who was writing actually looked at her. So embarrassing. Boss ass sakes, come back quickly. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS 1/1. Chapter 2082. Although there was something wrong with the atmosphere, she couldn't let it continue, or Kay or Lily felt that she couldn't stand it anymore. Miss Jenna?" Kay or Lily said tentatively. "Please come in. You don't have to stand outside the door." The girl nodded silently and then walked into the room. She walked around Miss Maid, who was writing formulas, and then sat down slowly, opposite to Yi. The young girl Jean casually glanced at the papers on the table, wanting to see what this woman had written, and then, there was no then. She couldn't understand. She couldn't understand at all. She couldn't even understand what was written. She just felt that it was some kind of mathematical formula. How could it be like this? The tutors that her father hired all praised her for being a fast learner. She had changed several tutors, but all of them said that there was nothing left to teach her. Could this be the difference between a country bumpkin and a city dweller? "I'm not illiterate. Miss Jenna, it's still too early for you to understand these things. You don't have to read it. It will be very tiring." Miss Maid suddenly stopped writing and looked up. The girl didn't want to be outdone. Indeed, ordinary people can't understand these things. Things that are beyond the knowledge of the people may be the domain of heresy. Miss Maid smiled faintly. "Then, Miss Jenna, you can consider me as a heresy." The girl couldn't help but feel that her fist was waving cotton. This woman from the city was really powerful. If a woman from the same village quarreled with her, she would use all her strength and blush. "I heard that the people of the church liked to capture heresy, tie them to the pillar, and burn them." The girl chuckled and said, "Especially heretics, burning them once is not enough. In order to prevent the heretics from using evil arts to resurrect themselves, even the charred corpses will be burned a second time until they are completely reduced to ashes." Can you imagine that kind of pain? Miss Maid's bright eyes looked at the girl, but she didn't say anything. She just shook her head gently. "I will hope that Miss Jenna will never understand this kind of pain." The girl frowned. Of course, she couldn't understand this pain. She was the wielder of this sword of victory, the chosen human of Saint Michael. How could she be a heretic? At this time, the servant girl said, "Miss Jenna is looking for someone, right? However, the person you're looking for hasn't returned yet. Do you want to continue waiting here, or do you want me to leave a message?" The girl frowned again and said without thinking, "Do you know who I'm looking for?" "I think I know." Miss Maid chuckled. The girl couldn't help but ask directly, "What's your relationship with him?" Miss Maid said, "I'm just an ordinary maid by the master's side." "Maid?" The young girl couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment before nodding her head. However, she didn't say anything. If it was only a maid, but why did he need such a beautiful maid? Sure enough, the men in the city had bad intentions. "Wait, did you just say that it's just one of the people around you?" The young girl had a good foundation and was rather quick-witted. "You mean you're not the only one?" Master's family business isn't small. Miss Maid chuckled and said, "Of course, there are many servants around him. It's naturally not strange to have a few maids." The young girl's face suddenly darkened. A few? So many? There was a reason why it was a maid and not a maid. Although Mr. Jacques wasn't a noble, he was still a famous farm owner and had some family background. Therefore, the young girl had been exposed to some high society matters since she was young. It was said that to the master, a maid was the kind of servant who could solve all kinds of needs. The young girl was inexperienced. When she imagined some things, she felt flustered, and even her throat became dry. Looking at the woman in front of her, who had an almost impeccable bearing, the young girl felt like she was facing a tall mountain. Why wasn't that smooth-tongued fellow back yet? Did you hear anything? Suddenly, Kate Airlily's voice sounded. It's coming from outside. The young girl frowned and listened carefully. Immediately, her expression changed drastically. She stood up instantly and exclaimed, "Oh no, it's a warning. There's an enemy attack. It's the Burgundian cavalry. Find a place to hide first, or go to the village office to meet up with my father." As she spoke, the young girl lifted her long skirt and rushed out in a hurry. Seeing this, Miss Maid suddenly sighed. She still can't keep her cool. I can't keep my cool either. Miss Maid K. Lily grabbed the feather duster in panic. What should we do? What should we do? Boss Asakes isn't back yet. What should we do? Miss K. Lily, can I ask you for a favor? Miss Maid said suddenly. What's the matter at this time? Miss K. Lily couldn't help but be stunned, and her trembling body couldn't help but stop. Miss Maid chuckled and said, I want to borrow your destiny system to take a look. Suddenly, Kate Lily's eyes opened gradually. She probably couldn't react in time and said subconsciously, What did you just say? She became extremely flustered. The destiny system is the most private thing, the most sacred and inviolable wealth of the citizens of the Holy Light Kingdom. How can I? Miss K. Lily, actually you have the destiny system. Miss Maid said indifferently. How is that possible? Kate Lily screamed subconsciously and immediately knew that she said something wrong. Of course I also have the destiny system. Miss Yi, are you kidding me? Don't be afraid. Miss Maid stood up and walked to K. Lily's side. Don't panic, and don't hide it. I said you have the destiny system, so you have it. You're not a heretic hiding in the free city. You're just a little underdeveloped. Underdeveloped? Subconsciously, Miss K. Lily thought that she usually wore a C bra without a sponge. Okay? Although she usually wore a maid's uniform, she couldn't say that she was underdeveloped, right? Miss Maid waved her hand and drew a line in front of Lily's chest. Heaven's mandate, activate. Instantly, Kate Lily felt as if something was going to rush out of her body. This impulse crazily gathered in her chest. She even felt an unprecedented sense of expansion and couldn't help uttering a painful moan. At the same time, in K. Lily's sight, a light curtain similar to an interface was slowly opening. At the moment when it opened, K. Lily even forgot about the abnormality of her body. She looked at the light curtain forming little by little in a daze. It turns out that the interface of the system is really colorful. K. Lily murmured as if she was in a dream, and even her hands trembled, wanting to touch the light curtain in front of her. She never knew that her destiny system really existed. She always thought that her destiny system was just a decoration, a gray, lifeless thing that wasn't even a business card. It was the proof of her innate sin. She used to wander in the wilderness of the free city. Since she was sensible, she never took the initiative to enter any town. She didn't even have parents. Only Boss Asakes didn't care about her. He brought her back to the Rose Mansion from the wilderness, gave her a stable job, and even taught her how to hide the fact that her destiny system couldn't be used. So it turns out that even I am capable of obtaining faith. You don't even have yourself. What do you need faith for? Kate Lily subconsciously raised her head, and through the interface of the destiny system, her eyes fell on Miss Yi. But at this time, Miss you can't look at me directly. K. Lily's spirit instantly seemed to be hit by something. and she completely lost her consciousness. The rapid sound of the horn had already resounded throughout the village. At this time, the militiaman who was responsible for standing guard in front of the village panicked and climbed down from the wooden watchtower. But because he was too frightened, he accidentally fell down all the way. But he didn't care about the pain and quickly struggled to get up. The warning horn had just been blown, and the people in charge of the village didn't have time to react. He had to report what he saw as soon as possible. Fortunately, because Mr. Jacques came back early to report, the militiamen in the village had already started the defense work. The village had been attacked several times, and some defensive equipment had already been prepared. Once it was needed, it could be pulled out immediately. Be careful. Not knowing who warned, the militiamen subconsciously looked at the source of the sound. But at this moment, an intense, stinging sensation almost suffocated the militia on the sentry post. What followed was his body directly falling to the ground under the influence of the huge inertia. At this time, there was a heavy double-handed sword on his back. The double-handed sword directly pierced through the militiaman's body and nailed him to the ground. And this double-handed sword was obviously thrown from a distance. At the same time, two figures quickly came to the side of the militiaman who fell to the ground. "How are you?" "He can't live." The two people who were rushing towards them were Nan Xiaonan and the boss of Arthashis. They were looking for food in the village and had also noticed the cavalry charging towards them from afar. Nan Xiaonan was sometimes very bold, and Mr. Asakes was more curious at this time. The two of them almost didn't plan and directly ran to the nearest village entrance. But in the end, they couldn't save the militiamen. "This sword seems to be..." Mr. Asakes looked at the double-handed sword that pierced through the militiaman's body in surprise. This was the double-handed sword used by the cavalry captain, Lionbell, in the Rose Mansion. He can throw the sword from such a distance, and it has such power. The Arthashis boss looked at the menacing cavalry in front of the village in disbelief. How terrifying is his arm strength? When he threw it, it was at least a few hundred meters away. It doesn't seem like the strength of a normal human. Nan Xiaonan frowned slightly, and then she pulled Mr. Asash's arm and hid to the side. This was because the Burgundian cavalry had already forced their way to the village's first line of defense. The wooden stakes blocking the road were like paper under the charge of the war horses. A few militiamen who were in charge of the first line of defense wanted to ignite the kerosene, but they missed the opportunity because they were too panicked. They were directly knocked away and trampled by the charging war horses, and there was no chance for them to survive. The militiamen at the second line of defense screamed and prepared to fight. However, how could a few militiamen and some wooden roadblocks block the charge of dozens of cavalrymen? The line of defense was broken one after another, and the 20 to 30 militiamen that the village temporarily organized had all fallen. The Burgundian cavalry had officially invaded the village. Fortunately, the villagers had already evacuated and temporarily moved to the back of the village. However, Nan Xiaonan and Mr. Asakes didn't know what the next step would be. "Lady Nan, did you notice that this group of cavalrymen seems a little strange?" Mr. Asakes hid at the side and saw the entire process of the cavalrymen breaking through the line of defense. He couldn't help but have an extremely heavy expression at this moment. "I'm not blind," Nan Xiaonan said. "It's more than strange. These guys don't look like humans now. What do the Burgundian cavalrymen look like? Their bodies were stained with blood, and there were even all kinds of wounds. They seemed to have been torn open by claws or bitten open by teeth. Not only the cavalrymen, but even the war horses had wounds that were exhausted to death. Their faces were abnormally pale. They didn't have eyeballs, only the whites of their eyes. What appeared on their faces was ferocity and madness that wanted to destroy everything. The cavalrymen rushed into the village and crazily crashed into everything. They waved their weapons and directly slashed anything they touched. They don't look like humans. Then what do they look like?" Mr. Asakes took a deep breath and asked. "Something like the dead." Nan Xiaonan thought and said, "These guys should have already died once. Do you see that guy? His chest is pierced. His heart is long gone. What's going on?" Mr. Essex was shocked. When they were at Rose Mansion, they were clearly still humans. How did they become like this in the middle of the night? They came here through the forest. Nan Shannon bit her thumbnail and muttered. They should have encountered something when they passed through the forest. What could it be? Mr. Jacques brought people here. Are they planning to fight against this group of crazy cavalrymen? Essex waved his hand and pointed. Inside the village, Mr. Jacques held a sharp sword and quickly rushed out with a group of young people in the village. However, the moment Mr. Jacques met the cavalrymen, he was greatly shocked by the appearance of the cavalrymen. What kind of monsters are these? Chapter 2083. When Mr. Jacques arrived with the militia of the young village, the mutated cavalrymen, led by Leon Bell, reacted instantly. This group of terrifying horsemen instantly besieged Mr. Jacques. War horses, weapons, blood-stained armors, and murky white eyeballs. All of these elements formed a painting of hell in front of Mr. Jacques and the others. They weren't facing the ferocious Burgundian horsemen. Instead, they were facing monsters that were even more terrifying. They were like demons. I don't want to deal with these guys. Terrified, a young man with a wooden spear in his hand turned around and tried to escape after yelling. However, he couldn't pass through the armor of the horseman. He tried to lie on the ground and escape from under the war horse, but a war spear pierced his body. The horseman on the war horse raised the war spear. As a result, the young militia's body was lifted up high. He struggled and screamed in pain in the air, but the more he struggled, the more his body slid down along the war spear. The villagers couldn't bear to see this cruel scene, and many of them lowered their heads. Demons! Mr. Jacques was shocked, scared, and angry. His mind was blank, but his arms waved the weapon, and his body instinctively swung the sword at the horseman. He only practiced swordsmanship for a while, and he wasn't even a dabbler. However, even so, Mr. Jacques was one of the most powerful warriors in the village. But this time, a big sword directly cut Mr. Jacques' sword in half. This sword was obviously more expensive than the one that Mr. Jacques brought to the Rose Mansion. This was an antique that Mr. Jacques collected in his house, and it wasn't as sharp and hard as the one that he lent to Luaccio in the Rose Mansion. Although this sword was expensive, it was only an ornamental item. At this moment, the big sword not only broke Mr. Jacques' sword, but it also knocked him to the ground. After falling to the ground, Mr. Jacques looked at the person who knocked him back in horror. Leon Bell, the young cavalry captain of the Burgundian horsemen, the terrifying guy who could wield a two-handed sword with one hand. Leon Bell was even scarier now. Leon Bell waved his big sword again, as if he wanted to cut Mr. Jacques in half. However, a loud roar suddenly sounded. Run! A wooden cart used to transport groceries was rushing over at high speed. The person pushing the wooden cart was surprisingly Mr. Arthaces, who had come to Donnermy village as an outsider. It's you. Mr. Jacques was in disbelief. The wooden chariot, pushed by Arthasheth, directly knocked away the war horses, creating a gap in the encirclement of the knights. Not only that, the wooden chariot directly crashed into the young captain of the knights, Leon Bell. Run! Mr. Arthaces yelled. Mr. Jacques and the group of villager soldiers were instantly alerted. Looking at the gap that was broken, they all rushed forward. At this moment, Mr. Essex took the torch from the wooden cart and waved it in front of the horsemen like a weapon. He didn't want the torch to be able to deal with the horsemen. He just wanted the torch to be able to startle the war horses and disrupt the horsemen's formation. But unexpectedly, the horsemen on the war horses were the horsemen instead of the war horses. Are these horsemen afraid of fire? Instantly, Mr. Essex had this speculation, but he didn't have time to think about it. He turned around and lit the straw on the wooden cart. Then, he pushed the burning wooden cart and rushed forward again. In Nan Shannon's words, what a fierce horseman! In the distance, the witch of her subworld couldn't help but be dumbfounded when she saw this scene. She had never imagined that this lady boss of Assassins would be so ferocious. There had been no movement at all before this, but he had rushed in as he pleased, and he had even succeeded in rescuing her. You should run too. The moment he pushed the burning wooden cart past Nan Shannon's hiding place, The boss of Arthashes couldn't help but roar. Nan Shounen almost cursed at him. I've been well hiding here. Why did you expose me? But the horsemen who were in chaos soon recovered. At this moment, Mr. Assakes, who was pushing the burning wooden cart, was the brightest boy in the night. It was impossible not to notice him. Seeing the horsemen who had regained their morale and were charging towards her, Nan Shounen crawled out of her hiding place with a dark face. You guys follow me. Mr. Jacques turned around and said quickly, We are here to delay the horsemen until the villagers can evacuate. They should have evacuated by now. We can use the terrain of the village to get rid of these monsters. They are riding war horses, so it won't be difficult for them to move in the village. Before he finished, the two horsemen broke through the walls of the houses and courtyards. They even broke through the houses of the villagers. They were not affected by the horsemen at all. This group of monsters. Jacques was so angry that he hurriedly scolded. Nan Shounen also scolded in her heart. If only I could Xing Chuang once, I wouldn't be so embarrassed. Damn it. Miss Maid said it was because the rules here didn't allow it. But what did the rules allow? The horsemen like the undead appeared. You can't play like this. Get down. In the chaos, a familiar voice sounded. Hearing this voice, Mr. Assakes subconsciously remembered the moment when the exploration group first entered the forest and encountered the wild boar. He almost didn't think much, and his body instinctively rushed to the road in front of him. In the night sky, it seemed that someone threw an oil pot, and then a lit arrow was shot directly at the moment when the oil pot fell down. Boom! The sealed oil pot instantly exploded into a ball of flame in the air. The flame immediately dispersed, and through the exploded oil, it directly sprinkled on the horseman. The oil attached to the horseman's body, and the flame began to spread rapidly. The horses of the horsemen suddenly panicked and became difficult to control. Many of them directly fell to the ground. Over there. At this time, a young militia stretched out his hand and pointed. Above the houses in the village, there was a figure quickly climbing and moving on the roofs of the houses. After a while, this figure once again threw an oil pot into the night sky and then lit an arrow to destroy it. The second oil pot made the fire more fierce. Only the sound of air breaking was heard, and one after another, sharp arrows hit the horseman's face that was attacked by the flames. Not every arrow could hit the center of the horseman's forehead, but they didn't miss either. All the arrows were aimed at the horseman's face, which showed the archery skills of the person who shot them. Finally, after a round of attacks, the figure who shot arrows stopped. At this time, she was standing on the roof of the house closest to them. Under the reflection of the moonlight and the flames, the girl who was holding a hunting bow and wearing a long dress raised the bow again, put the last arrow, and aimed. The bowstring instantly contracted, and the last arrow in the quiver directly shot through the eyes of a horseman. It's her. Jean. It's Jacques' daughter. At this time, Mr. Assakes raised his head and looked at the girl under the moonlight in a daze. He couldn't even connect the girl who saved them with her dress of the upper-class society. Jean, how could you? Mr. Jacques was about to say something at this time, but the girl rushed to say first, Father, now is not the time to talk about this. Hurry up and stay away. This group of horsemen is coming up. What? Aren't they? Mr. Jacques was shocked. He looked back and saw that the flames on these horsemen had been extinguished. Although these horsemen were almost thrown off their horses, they didn't seem to feel pain at this time. Even those who were shot in the face could still stand up. Facing the horsemen who were approaching again, the girl suddenly retreated and hid in the blind spot of the people on the roof. At this time, the girl quickly tore her long dress from the edge of her thigh and then reached inside. Instantly, a long stone sword was taken out from her dress. Holding the stone sword in her hand, the girl took a deep breath and walked to the place where she stood just now. She held the stone sword in her hand. Sword of victory high. I saw a miracle. The girl's clear voice sounded under the night sky. I also saw, Saint Michael, faith will guide me and bring hope to people. The holy light will guide me until the evil is destroyed. Because I'm the pure, white saint sword envoy. Instantly, a dazzling light was released from the stone sword and turned into a light beam that shot into the sky. The flashing light not only illuminated the entire village, but also the fields and mountains near the village. In the village, the dazzling light passed through the open doors and windows and invaded each house at the same time. At this moment, in the house that was used to house the foreigners, when a light appeared and the girl's voice echoed, the servant girl's perfect appearance suddenly twitched uncontrollably. The etiquette behind her seemed to be on the verge of breaking down at any moment. She even held her forehead with one hand and sighed heavily. I shouldn't have come, really. This is really... The servant girl suddenly had a feeling of social death. She turned her head and looked at Lily, who had lost her main consciousness because of the awakening of the destiny system. Lily had become muddle-headed. She was thinking about this problem. I should just forget about it and not install a machine for this servant girl. I'm the pure white saint sword envoy. The girl's last words were like a chant. After the light beam from Sword of Victory disappeared, the clouds in the sky revealed a piece of holy white light. Under the holy light, a huge light shadow appeared in the sky. At this moment, the light shadow held a long sword with both hands and slowly spread out the wings behind it. 6 wings. My God, it's an angel. Saint Michael. It's really Saint Michael. I didn't believe it before, but now I believe it. Miracle. It's really a miracle. In the distance, the villagers of Donnermy village who were evacuating all knelt on the ground and put their palms together when they saw the huge angel's light shadow under the night sky. At this moment, they were worshiping it devoutly. In the village, seeing the girl summoning the angel's light shadow, the young militia also knelt down and worshipped it devoutly under the holy light. Mr. Jacques didn't move. He just froze and looked at his daughter, who was holding the stone sword high, with a complicated expression. On the other side, Nan Shannon frowned and was thinking. Mr. Essex looked as if he had seen a ghost, murmuring to himself, Angel, Blazing Angel? St. Michael, isn't it the one in Blazing Sky City? So, is this place under the jurisdiction of Blazing Sky City? Where is this place? Holy light. At this moment, Mr. Essex also felt it. It was basically the same as the holy light he had felt from this saint statue in the limited number of times he had been in the City of Freedom. However, the appearance of the holy light and the angel's light shadow didn't make the crazy Burgundian cavalry retreat. Instead, under the illumination of the holy light, this group of mutated cavalry became even crazier. They roared at the sky as if they wanted to ascend to the heavens, as if they wanted to kill the angel, as if they wanted to destroy the holy light. The angel was furious. It waved its sword in the sky and slashed horizontally. A huge sword light swept down, and the Burgundian cavalry in the village were instantly annihilated under this huge sword light. Shrill cries seemed to echo, but after the sword light passed, everything in front of them disappeared, leaving only a huge crack on the ground. The cavalry that had almost wiped out the entire village disappeared from this world with a single blow from the angel's shadow. The power of the miracle made the pious look on the faces of the people more and more intense. The girl holding the sword of victory on the roof of the building now had a rosy face. She slowly exhaled, and the angel's light shadow in the sky slowly disappeared. In the end, only pieces of white feathers that emitted a faint light sprinkled down from the sky. The girl reached out and picked up a feather that fell in her palm. The feather became like a snowflake and disappeared with a touch. The girl took a deep breath, looked at the people, and said loudly, From today onwards, you can call me Saint Joan of Arc. I am the agent of Saint Michael, and I will lead you to drive the brutal Burgundians back to the origin of their ancestors. The people cheered and shouted the name of Saint Joan of Arc. At the farm of Donnermy village, the windmill observation platform used to grind flour. Boss Luo was holding a piece of charcoal in his hand and drawing something on the drawing paper on the rack. He was painting Donnermy village from this angle. He was painting the huge shadow of the angel under the night sky. He He was painting the girl, standing on the balcony with her sword raised high. He was still painting the girl's expression, making it seem very lifelike. It feels a little off," he said softly, then waved his hand. The angel's shadow in the painting disappeared just like that. Boss Luo probably felt satisfied with this, so there was a smile on his face. Chapter 2084. A group of people gathered together to celebrate the defeat of the Burgundian cavalry. Although the village was still severely damaged this time, the sword of the angel almost flattened 1/5 of the village. But it was a victory. For the first time, under the attack of the Burgundian cavalry, Domremy village not only survived the crisis, but also won an unprecedented victory. More importantly, the appearance of Saint Joan of Arc brought the power of a miracle, and she also brought hope. The destroyed parts could be rebuilt, and the future would be better. There was no reason not to cheer. The villagers clustered around the young girl. Even the village chief, Charles, was cautiously accompanying her and talking with her, his head half lowered throughout the whole process. The villagers spontaneously took out food, treasured wine, and lit a bonfire, waiting for the arrival of a new day. "Eat something." Nan Xiaonan brought a small plate of food and a cup of farm-brewed fruit wine to Mr. Arthash's side and sat down. Actually, they had already returned to the guest house and met with the servant girl once. However, the servant girl used the reason that she needed to study the symptoms of Mr. Ludic and Mr. Ludic as an excuse to decline the celebration in the village. Nan Xiaonan didn't want to stay in the small room, so she came with Essex to join the fun. Then they found that they seemed to be unable to integrate into the joy of the villagers. Actually, it seems pretty good to watch these villagers celebrate like this. Mr. Essex looked at the bonfire in front of him. "I remember the experience when I travel with my teacher. It feels fulfilling." Nan Xiaonan blinked her eyes. With a trace of curiosity, she asked, "Boss Arthash's, why did you rush out to rescue Mr. Jacques and the others without a care? If Arthash's hadn't appeared with the wooden cart, Mr. Jacques and the others would have probably died before Saint Joan of Arc appeared." Mr. Essex said casually, "When you were in a mansion, your companions also stood up bravely. Why can't I?" Nan Xiaonan opened her mouth. What he said made sense. She was speechless. Besides, with the moral standards of the residents of the Holy Light Kingdom, there was nothing wrong with this behavior of risking one's life to save others. Like hell, I'll believe you. The demoness of the Otherworld Academies could still tell if she was speaking from the bottom of her heart. At this moment, Nan Xiaonan took out a book in front of the boss of Arthash's. "What is this?" Essex asked curiously. Nan Xiaonan placed the booklet in front of the Arthash's boss. "Weren't you curious about what kind of travel guide we read before we found your Rose Mansion that's about to close down? This is it. Lady Nan really knows how to poke at people's wounds." Mr. Essex shook his head. He took the travel brochure from the other party's hand and casually flipped open the title page. He saw the author's name in the column. His expression also had a subtle change at this moment. He suddenly raised his eyes and looked at Nan Xiaonan. This is... Nan Xiaonan hinted with her eyes. She looked at the young girl in the crowd who was surrounded by people. In the end, all of this is just a coincidence. Or is there a secret that no one knows? Mr. Essex looked dignified and continued to open the travel brochure, carefully reading it. Nan Xiaonan didn't speak, silently waiting for his reaction. After a while, Mr. Essex slowly sighed and closed the travel brochure. He thought for a while and said, "This travel brochure did mention Rose Mansion, but it was a mansion several generations ago. The same goes for the other introductions. If I'm not mistaken, this travel booklet introduced the Freedom City from at least 200 years ago." 200 years ago? Nan Xiaonan frowned. At least 200 years ago, maybe even earlier. Mr. Essex shook his head and said, "I don't have any other information on hand, so I can't examine it carefully. Lady Nan, may I ask where you got this travel brochure?" Miss May casually threw it away. "I bought it from a roadside bookstall," Nan Xiaonan said in a low voice, and then added, "in the other 7 capital cities." "The other 7 capital cities?" Mr. Essex couldn't help but frown. He thought for a while and said, "Perhaps It was the printed version that was leaked out from Freedom City. I remember my teacher once told me that Freedom City had a large-scale book destruction operation hundreds of years ago. Many classic documents were also destroyed at that time. Now, there is no way to find them. But if it was spread to the other 7 capital cities at that time, it is possible to preserve it. Books were destroyed? Nan Xiaonan blinked. Why? Mr. Asakes thought for a while and said, I heard that it was because a grand scholar at that time was studying the holy words and had an obscure misinterpretation of the words of the sage. Because this grand scholar was too famous, he affected many scholars at that time and also influenced other people's works. Therefore, in order to maintain the correctness of the holy words, Freedom City launched a large-scale book-burning operation. Most of the scholars who misinterpreted the holy words were arrested, especially the grand scholar who was the leader. Later, after a trial, he was determined to be a heretic. His family was also judged to be the bloodline of sinners and were all expelled from Freedom City. Nan Xiaonan said in surprise, so the Freedom City also had a tyrannical side in the past. How can this be called a cruel rule? Mr. Asakes shook his head and said in a deep voice, Don't you know how much of an impact heresy has on faith? The foundation of the Holy Light Kingdom is faith. Once it is eroded by heresy and loses faith, how can the residents of the Holy Light Kingdom survive? You have hands and feet. Can't you live without praying? Nan Xiaonan didn't say this out loud. The residents of the Holy Light Kingdom believed that they couldn't live without faith. Just look at the city lord of Duran City, who went crazy because he couldn't accept that he couldn't pray. Looking at the righteous Asakes, Nan Xiaonan decided to go one step further. She directly said, However, Mr. Asakes, you seem to belong to the type of people who can't pray. Miss Maid in the mansion is the same. Aren't you living well? Asakes was shocked, but he didn't show it on his face. He said in surprise, Lady Nan, your joke isn't funny. It's good that you said this in this strange place. If you casually said this in Freedom City, it will affect Kay or Lily's life. Be careful with your words. Be careful with your words. Nan Xiaonan nodded apologetically and lowered her head to eat. They acted as if they didn't discuss this problem. After a while, an unexpected but reasonable person appeared in front of them. Mr. Jacques. Mr. Jacques, why did you ask me to come out alone? Asakes looked at this village's farm owner with complicated emotions. Vaguely, he saw some familiar features on this Mr. Jacques' face. This Mr. Jacques' nose looked a bit similar to his grandfather's. First of all, I want to thank you for stepping forward and saving us. Mr. Jacques slowly said, If it weren't for you, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to wait for Jean to appear. It's a small matter. Asakes didn't care. I discussed with Charles and the others, and we decided to send out most of our men to search for your city lord Durand. Mr. Jacques continued. Mr. Asakes nodded. He wasn't too surprised. It was hard to repay a favor. He had saved many people, and it would be unreasonable if the people of Donremy village didn't help him search. Perhaps, when he saved them, he had the same thought. Part of it. Also, Mr. Jacques looked deeply at Asakes and said in a low voice, Why did you save me? In that environment, you had a high chance of dying. Those monsters were too scary. Arthaces didn't use the same excuse he used on Nan Xiaonan. He just smiled bitterly and said, If I say that even I don't know why I did it, I just did it at that time, would you believe me? I believe you. Mr. Jacques said directly. Your eyes told me that you didn't say anything. Asakes, you're also a brave man. I hope we can become friends and have the opportunity to be honored by your bravery. We'll be friends. Perhaps we will be staying here for a long time. Having a friend is something to be happy about. Arthas smiled and said, Perhaps we will be staying here for a long time. Mr. Jacques patted Arthaces' shoulder. There's one more thing. I want to invite you and your companions to stay in my house for the time being. After all, it's not convenient for you to stay in the guest house all the time. Besides, you have 2 patients. I've already asked the village doctor to prepare. He'll come to my house tomorrow morning. That's great. Asakes nodded. Ludic and Durand's assistants did indeed need a good environment to recuperate. Mr. Jacques was the richest person in the village. Not only was his house big, he also had servants. Many things would be convenient for him. What did Mr. Jacques say to you? When they returned, Nan Xiaonan looked at Asakes and asked, Nothing. Mr. Jacques is very hospitable. He wants to invite us to his house as guests. Asakes casually said, he also found a doctor and agreed to form a search team tomorrow morning to help find Durand. It's probably because you saved them. Nan Xiaonan nodded. I can imagine. All right, I have a question for you. Did you see Laval? Laval isn't. Laval? Asakes was startled. Only then did he remember that he didn't see Laval along the way. After the battle, they returned to the guest house and did not see Laval. They thought that Laval had also come out to participate in the village's celebration. All right, Nan Xiaonan thought for a moment and said, It seems that we don't even know when Mr. Laval went missing. Asakes subconsciously said, Laval is Ludwig's private secretary. He never leaves his side. With Ludwig's condition, he can't be too far away. Maybe he had something to do and went out for a while. That's why, Nan Xiaonan said, our situation is the same. We came to this strange place. Do you think Laval has something to do that made him have to leave for a while? Could it be that he suffered a mental breakdown because he couldn't pray like Durand? I'll walk around the village and look for him. Asakes quickly said, Lady Nan, are you coming to help? I'm just full. Nan Xiaonan stood up and stretched. I'll treat it as a post-meal digestion exercise. Laval, Laval. Mr. Laval, it's morning. Wake up, shouts sounded in the village. The two of them had met a few times in the village, but they didn't find Laval in the end. There was one time when they met. After shaking their heads, they decided to search one more time. After that, they went in different directions. Their voices also gradually faded away. The place where they met this time was beside a dry well in the village. There were traces of the Burgundian cavalry's attack all around, and some of the houses had even collapsed. The villagers were still celebrating, and no one came to clean up the mess for the time being. A faint orange-red light suddenly flashed in the dry well. At this moment, there was a figure under the dry well. His hands were scratching the soil and stones in the dry well. There were many small cracks on his body. The faint orange-red light came from the cracks on his skin. When the calling sound disappeared due to the distance, he suddenly became quiet again. His body curled up and shivered. When dawn came, he suddenly stopped moving as if he had turned into a stone. The cracks on his body had closed up. The deep part of the old well was completely dark. They all looked at her and wanted to hear her voice. The girl suddenly felt troubled. She didn't know what she was going to say. She had only thought of the lines she was going to say before she made her move. This was the best line she could think of. The most important thing was that it wasn't shameful. Most of the villagers were passionate. The passionate girl didn't even have the chance to talk to her family. The sky was slightly bright. The girl took the opportunity to say, A new day has come. After a night of fear and joy, we need to rest to recover from the physical fatigue. The village needs to be rebuilt. Let's end the celebration. Yes, St. Joan of Arc is right. Let's go back and have a good rest, then rebuild our home. The crowd gradually dispersed. The young girl slowly exhaled. She suddenly found that such a scene was actually not as good as she imagined. Even after the initial excitement, she felt a little uncomfortable. She didn't know where her father was. After the celebration began, she didn't see her father's figure. The young girl looked around and found another figure under the eaves not far away. He stood under the eaves, and the shadow covered almost half of his body. He stood there and looked at her silently. It was the fiancé that her father found. Her heart trembled slightly, and her body subconsciously walked toward the figure under the eaves. She didn't know why, but she felt that as long as this person stood there, it would make people want to get closer, closer. Hashtag, 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 hashtag PS1. Thank you, Shake Body Transformation. Boss's brother Faye. Winter snow soaring in the sky. As long as there is a peanut, I can only offer my hands to Cutie Cutie PS2. I can't believe so many people came at once. Although thoughts can sometimes erupt like spring water, people will also dry up when there's a lot of water. PS3 0/4 PS4. As usual. Chapter 2085. Her body leaned forward slightly due to inertia. When she came back to her senses, she realized that she had unknowingly trotted to the front of the figure under the eaves. The sword of victory in her arms seemed to have added a lot of weight to the inertia. "When did you come back?" the girl asked. "When the cavalry attacked. Were you injured?" "I don't think I look like I'm injured," Boss Luo replied with a smile. "That's true." The girl nodded. "Your swordsmanship is very, well, not bad. It shouldn't be a problem for you to protect yourself." "So, you came back a long time ago? Why did my father say that he didn't see you?" "Mr. Jacques should be very busy," Boss Luo said casually. "Might as well not disturb him." She naturally reached out and grabbed Boss Luo's hand and pulled him away. "Come, I'll take you to see my father. He must want to see you come back safely." She couldn't pull Boss Luo away. The girl looked back in confusion. Boss Luo said, "I'll find a suitable time to visit Mr. Jacques again. For now, I want to meet up with my companions." The girl was startled. "You've been back for so long, and you haven't met up with your companions?" Boss Luo smiled. "Miss Jean's figure when she defeated the cavalry was too shocking. I couldn't help but watch for a while, so I didn't have time. Here it comes, the city man's sweet words." The girl took a deep breath and suppressed the uneasiness in her heart. She was now the representative of miracle. She had to be reserved. That's right, she had to be reserved. "Well, if that's the case, then you should go and see your companions first," the girl said calmly. "They should be in the house over there. It's a place for foreigners." "Oh, you don't know the way, right? I'll reluctantly take you there." "Thank me." "Thank you, Miss Jean." The girl was slightly proud and led the way in front. After a while, she suddenly turned back and asked, "By the way, I heard that you have a lot of maids in your house. All of them are young and beautiful?" Boss Luo said in surprise. "I wonder where that young lady heard about it." "Why do you care where I heard it from?" The girl said indifferently. "Just answer me. Did you hear it or not?" "I don't think so." Boss Luo thought for a moment and said, "But in fact, there are a few female employees. As for their appearance, as their employer, I think I should give them some recognition." "Huh, men." Sure enough, he was the same as the young masters of the upper class that her father had described. The girl suddenly felt a little unhappy, but she gradually increased her pace. Soon, she had left Boss Luo behind. She suddenly stopped in front of them. When Boss Luo walked up to her, she pointed at a house in front of them. "It's over there," the girl said indifferently. "I'm a little tired. I want to go home and rest. You can go by yourself." Boss Luo said, "Since you know it's here, let me send Miss Jana home first. I think this is what a man should do." "I don't need protection," the girl said indifferently. "I don't need your protection either. I'm the messenger of Saint Michael. No one can hurt the messenger of God." "That's it. Then at least take this with you." Boss Luo took off his jacket and handed it to her. "What for?" The girl shook her head and her expression softened a little. "I'm not cold." Boss Luo smiled and said, "If you're not cold, you can put on for a while. It'll be more convenient." "Convenient?" The girl frowned and looked at Boss Luo in confusion. Boss Luo's gaze seemed to move down a little. The girl looked down and saw her torn dress. Her dress was torn during the battle for convenience. After the battle, the villagers saw her as the incarnation of God. They didn't dare to look at her directly, and they didn't have any thoughts of profanity. She also sat down most of the time, so there was nothing wrong with it. But now, didn't that mean that this fellow had been staring the entire way? "Thank you," the young girl replied softly. She quickly took her coat and draped it around her waist, covering the area where her skirt had split open. "Miss Jana, take care." Boss Luo nodded. "See you later." I'll go back first." The girl ran away with Sword of Victory in her arms. When she was far away, she turned back and said, "See you later." He watched her figure disappear in the village and then turned around and walked toward the guest house. When he was about to arrive at the guest house, someone stood under the eaves with an oil lamp in his hand. The light from the oil lamp illuminated the road ahead. "Welcome back." Miss Maid's voice sounded in the quiet dawn. Boss Luo smiled. "I hope you'll always be waiting for me to light the lamp for me." "Master, you're getting better at saying sweet nothings." Miss Maid suddenly chuckled. "I can't stay where I am." Luochio chuckled and then walked into the guest house. In the house, except for Ludic, who was awake but unconscious, and the male assistant, who was still lying motionlessly, Miss Maid of Rose Mansion seemed to have fallen asleep and was lying on the table. In fact, when Asakes and Nan Shaunen came back, Kay Lily was already lying on the table. At that time, Asakes thought Kay Lily was too tired to wake her up, so he didn't wake her up. Instead, he went to the village celebration with Nan Shaunen. "What are you doing?" Boss Luo looked at the pile of things on the table. To be precise, it was a pile of things that only he could see. In the eyes of others, there was only a pile of paper on the table. "I'm trying to unlock the destiny system on Kay Lily." Miss Maid sat down at this time, extract it, and study the updated version of the destiny system during the years when I wasn't in Freedom City. Boss Luo blinked and said in surprise, "The destiny system can be updated?" "Of course, it needs to be updated." Miss Maid thought for a while and said, "After all, this is a system developed by the heavenly state to adapt to the heavenly state. But it's more difficult to develop an original ecosystem that completely matches the heavenly state situation. So, like most systems, it will constantly find loopholes and solve these loopholes through continuous updates." Boss Luo said calmly, "You also participated in the development of the destiny system in the past, right?" Miss Maid smiled and said, "In the past, they thought that I liked to tinker with novel things, so they thought of me to do some chores. But besides me, there were a few other developers of the destiny system. Later on, after I left, it was mainly them." Boss Luo picked up Kay Lily's destiny system and thought for a while. "It's been so long. Will it be difficult?" "There will be some," Miss Maid said seriously, "but the core algorithm hasn't changed much. Over the years, the destiny system didn't seem to have a big breakthrough, so the work of unlocking it should be quite easy." Boss Luo said, "So, the reason why Miss Kay Lily can't pray and produce willpower is because her destiny system is locked." "Why is it locked?" Miss Maid said, "I haven't passed the background check yet. Once I open the background check, the other developers will know. So, I can only use other ways. It will take some time. You don't want them to know that you're back." Boss Luo looked at Miss Maid and asked. Miss Maid said calmly, "I don't care about what they think. I'll try not to expose myself unless the master has a clear intention to take action." "Then you don't have to care about what they think." Boss Luo said casually, "The background check has been opened. They will know if they know. At most, I'll take back the kingdom of heaven." Miss Maid's mouth couldn't help but open slightly, looking at her master's calm appearance. What did it mean to take back the kingdom of heaven? It meant that in the mythical side of the entire dimensional void, everything that belonged to the kingdom of heaven would face. "Why are you looking at me like this?" Boss Luo smiled and said, "The renter doesn't want to rent it anymore, so he won't renew the lease at the end of the lease period. Taking it back is not a very normal thing." Miss Maid was silent for the first time. Boss Luo gently picked up her palm. "Actually, you don't want to, right?" Miss Maid's eyes flickered, but she suddenly shook her head. "I'm just thinking that if the master wants to take back the kingdom of heaven, heaven will probably have to bleed this time to save the situation. This method is not bad. The rent of the kingdom of heaven hasn't changed, so there is indeed room for price increase." Boss Luo shook his head. He stood up, picked up the papers on the table, and knocked them on the table. After knocking them neatly, he smiled and said, "Sit properly." Miss Maid was stunned, but she had already sat down. Her sitting posture was perfect. Boss Luo put the folded draft papers on top of Miss Maid's head. 1 hour. Well, half an hour is enough. Let's play a game of punishment." Miss Maid didn't move, and the draft papers on top of her head didn't move at all. Boss Luo bent down, got close to Miss Maid's ear, and sniffed her fragrance. "I originally wanted to punish you by standing, but I'm afraid I will do something if you stand, so I'd better sit down." "If it's a punishment to stand, the master will want to do something." Her breath was like orchids, but the draft papers on top of her head didn't sway at all. "You'll know sooner or later." Boss Luo took a deep breath on Miss Maid's neck, his hands pressed on her shoulders, and then gently kneaded, "Don't move. The master is really starting to have bad intentions." With that, Miss Maid sighed lightly and opened Kay Lily's destiny system again. Without hesitation, She not only opened K. Air Lily's destiny system, but also directly opened the backstage of the Holy Light Kingdom's destiny system through it. She was one of the designers, so she naturally had a special channel that belonged to her alone. They should have thought of closing this channel, but obviously they didn't do it. So she came back, in a world bathed in holy light. She's back. A low voice sounded. Yes, she's back. It was a female voice. She finally came back. It was a sigh. 10 shooting stars flashed in the night sky. In a quiet night, perhaps only stargazers could find the flashes of shooting stars, but the observatory didn't say that there would be shooting stars tonight. The stargazers planned to wait for more shooting stars, but they didn't encounter any shooting stars for the rest of the night. The shooting stars seemed to be heading to the Saint City of Orleans, right? At the end of the shooting stars, in front of the Freedom Square of Orleans, the Saint City of Orleans, 10 figures welcomed at the same time. At this time, the 10 figures knelt down in front of the statue of the saint and piously prayed. Soon, they stood up. They were the 10 holy angels led by Bertrand. They were the 10 holy angels with the highest ranks in the Wings of Freedom Legion. Bertrand, where are we going to see the saintess? After praying, one of the holy angels asked directly, the saintess hasn't returned to the Wings of Liberty Legion for a long time. Why did she summon us this time? Bertrand, you're the one who initiated this meeting. Don't you know anything about it? Holy Angel Bertrand shook his head and said, we will know soon. The saintess is here. At the same time, the 10 holy angels sensed something, and they looked up almost at the same time. At this moment, there was a woman standing on the pedestal of the saint statue. She was wearing a black evening gown and had a charming smile on her face under the night sky. Holy Angel Bertrand greets the saintess. Bertrand bowed first, and the other holy angels followed him. Holy angels of the Wings of Liberty. Under the contrast of the black dress, Sage's skin was as white and flawless as snow. The charming smile on her face became even more pronounced. How long has it been since I last saw you, my most loyal subordinates? I miss you very much. All the holy angels, including Bertrand, looked as if they had seen a ghost at this moment. Generally speaking, the more formal and courteous the saintess spoke to them, the more likely it was for them to face some sort of danger. In the words of a certain holy angel, even if they were hung up and smoked, it would be a piece of cake for them. Holy Angel Bertrand could only brace himself and ask, Saintess, may I know why the saintess summoned us? Holy angels of the Wings of Liberty, are you willing to wave your swords at everything for me? The saintess asked softly. We are willing. The 10 holy angels didn't hesitate at all. Then, from now on, wave your swords. The saintess smiled and said, cut down, Saint Michael, from the heavenly kingdom's heaven rank for me. Saintess? Holy Angel Bertrand suddenly looked up. Looking at the situation, this is really a very bad situation. Compared to this, hanging him up and smoking his tears is really a small matter. Swinging their swords at Saint Michael wasn't a problem. The problem was that even if 100 holy angels swung their swords at him, they wouldn't be able to defeat him, not to mention that there were only 10 of them. Hashtag Kuj. XYZ. Hashtag PS. 1/4. Chapter 2086. Killing the Archangel from the stairs of the Kingdom of Heaven would probably be one of the worst deeds in the history of the Kingdom of Heaven, if it could be done. But there was no possibility of success at all. The 10 holy angels were silent at this time. They basically wouldn't disobey the orders of the saintess, but the saintess had also said that if her orders were unreasonable, they could refute. As the commander of the Wings of Liberty, Holy Angel Legion, the saintess didn't hesitate and gave all the holy angels the right to resist. If it's wrong, you should refute me. If it's depraved, you should purify me. This was the essence of the Wings of Liberty, Holy Angel Legion. They were the wind of freedom that spread the holy light, and everything was guided by the wind of freedom. Therefore, they respected and loved the saintess from the depths of their souls. Without the saintess, even though the Wings of Liberty, Holy Angel Legion was still the most powerful legion in the Kingdom of Heaven, it had no soul. I'm afraid it's impossible to do this. Holy Angel Bertrand shook his head at this time. Saintess, this joke is not funny, and it's a bit too much. Please be careful with your words. The Saintess not only gave the holy angels the right to resist, but she also gave them the right to be whipped. This was a special management mode that only the Wings of Liberty had among the many legions in the Kingdom of Heaven. On the base of the saint statue, the Saintess looked calm and said slowly, Bertrand, you think that what I said is impossible, so I'm definitely wrong, right? Bertrand also said calmly, Yes, Saintess. Besides, we don't have a reason to kill that person. Saintess, don't forget that that person is your guide. Let's not talk about the reason first. The Saintess chuckled and said, Let's first discuss the possibility of this matter. You don't have the confidence to complete this mission, right? Holy Angel Bertrand shook his head. Saint Michael is close to the Lord, and we can't hurt him. Saintess, you're joking again. The Saintess sat down and held the edge of the base with both hands. Her legs were crossed in the skirt. Indeed, in a head-on confrontation, not many people can hurt the guy who is close to the Lord. But what if it's not a head-on confrontation? Bertrand's expression changed instantly, and the 9 holy angels behind him showed a frightened expression. Looks like you've thought of it. The Saintess smiled and said, That's right. I'm talking about assassination. Bertrand's expression changed a few times. He lowered his head and didn't look at the saint's eyes. Instead, he muttered, Assassination methods can indeed increase the success rate, but it's just an increase from 0 to an infinitesimal chance. The other 9 holy angels didn't say anything. What Bertrand wanted to say was what they were thinking. The sage waited quietly as well. But the opportunity does exist. The next step is to analyze whether the motive is reasonable. Bertrand suddenly looked up at the saint. Saintess, can you tell us the reason for this operation? If I say that I don't intend to tell you the reason, Sage said expressionlessly, will you continue with this operation? Bertrand said directly, I'm sorry, Saintess. This is against the rules you set before. I'm afraid we can't do anything. Saint looked at the holy angels and said, Does this mean that I can no longer command my wings of freedom? Bertrand frowned subconsciously. The Saintess wouldn't speak in this tone. It was just that the Saintess had been living in the Freedom City of the Holy Light Kingdom for many years. During this long period of time, no one knew if the Saintess had changed. We need a reason to leave, Bertrand said seriously. Saintess, you know the uniqueness of the Wings of Freedom Legion. Whether this operation succeeds or not, it will bring the Wings of Freedom into an extremely dangerous situation. Brothers won't be afraid of death, but we need a reason. Saintess, even if you intend to betray the kingdom of heaven, it's also a reason. Saint's eyes narrowed, and she said in a low voice, If I really want to betray the kingdom of heaven, will you follow me? Do you think it's right? The holy angel's expressions changed in shock. Saint took a deep breath and said, The Lord has left to pursue the primordial. That is to say, the Lord has abandoned the kingdom of heaven. Now, the one in the kingdom of heaven is not the Lord. What? The archangel has been hiding this matter. Although he is close to the Lord, he is not the Lord. Saint's voice gradually deepened. But he already hopes to become the new Lord. I can't let his plan succeed. Even if the kingdom of heaven will be in turmoil, even if countless sacrifices have to be made, I must maintain the purity of faith and not let it be stolen. Do you have evidence? Holy Angel Bertrand couldn't help but take a step forward, looking excited. I'll give you the evidence. Saint waved her hand, and a figure instantly flew out and fell in front of the holy angels. After taking a closer look, they found that it was an angel in the form of a female. This is Angel Jarabe? Bertrand was stunned. She is one of the most loyal angels around, Saint Michael. How could she? This time, Saint Michael secretly came in the name of investigating the Holy Light Kingdom's power of will. Saint said calmly, Jarabe came to assassinate me under his instructions. The purpose is to kill or imprison me, then replace me and steal the entire Freedom City. How was it possible? The holy angels were shocked. There's nothing impossible about it. Saint said calmly, I found out that Saint Michael has been secretly creating a substitute who can replace me for many years. Once Jarabe successfully assassinates me, the one who appears in front of you again will no longer be the original me. Not only Freedom City, but the other 7 capitals of the Holy Light Kingdom also have similar arrangements. This time, his arrival will be the opportunity for him to completely control the Holy Light Kingdom. Bertrand took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. Although they were called holy angels, the holy angels of the wings of freedom were fundamentally different from the angels of the kingdom of heaven. They died in the war, and their souls ascended to the kingdom of heaven with the saints. In the end, they were reincarnated into holy angels, not angels born in the kingdom of heaven's holy pool. Not only were they born with genders, but they also retained some of the emotions they had when they were humans. They had emotions, and they were also more prone to degeneration than regular angels. Saint's words shocked the holy angels, but they maintained the most basic calmness. Therefore, Bertrand came directly in front of Angel Jarabe. Saint waved his hand and said, Supreme command. The unconscious Angel Jarabe on the ground began to disintegrate again, and the soul light hidden in the depths of his body was exposed to the holy angels. Supreme command. Only the highest figures in the 7 capitals of the Holy Light Kingdom had this authority. The holy angels did not doubt the supreme command of Saint. At this moment, the holy angels gathered in front of Angel Jarabe's soul light with solemn expressions, and they reached out to touch Angel Jarabe's soul light at the same time. This place contained the memories of Angel Jarabe, just like the destiny diary of the residents of the Holy Light Kingdom. After a moment, unexpectedly, I didn't expect that even the one who is close to the Lord would be corrupted by power, that one's power is too strong. The Lord has already left Eden and stepped onto the path of the beginning. It's inevitable that he will, no matter what, even if it's this Lord, since he wants to murder the saintess and replace her with a substitute, he must be prepared to be burned by the red lotus holy flame. Unforgivable. This matter needs to be considered at length. If that Lord is so easy to kill, his legend wouldn't have stood to this day. Saint silently listened to the holy angel's discussion. At this moment, she was quiet and dignified, and the charming aura from before had completely disappeared. At this moment, she looked completely in line with the bearing of a saint. After the holy angel's opinions gradually reached a consensus, Saint slowly said, You need to wait for an opportunity, and I will create this opportunity for you. Not only will you make a move, but I will too. I will always be with you, my former companions. We will also be with the saintess. The holy angels knelt down and said, Their pious beliefs made the statue of the saint in Freedom Square instantly release a brilliant light. Under the cover of the statue's brilliance, Saint was bathed in a layer of holy light. They knew that their beliefs were still there, and their prayers had reached the heart of the saintess. At this moment, Saintess waved her hand and made the holy angels stop praying. Your appearance is a secret, so don't make too much noise. From today onward, you will temporarily stop praying every day. As long as you have something in your heart, even if you don't pray formally, I can still hear your thoughts. The holy angels nodded. Since they were going to act in secret, it was indeed not appropriate to make too much noise. If they prayed in the Holy Light Kingdom, they would indeed make too much noise. I will arrange a new identity for you. Wait for my orders. Yes, Saint. It was night in Freedom City, and it was also night in the rest of the 7 capitals. The entire Holy Light Kingdom's time was the same, from sunrise to sunset. This meant that they all lived on the same day that the Lord had created, and then they all experienced the 7 days of creation together, which was 1 week. Maria's scenery was different from Freedom City's heavily commercialized appearance. This was a livable place. It was like spring all year round, and the scenery was picturesque. in front of a monastery that was built on the back of a cliff. Wait for me here. Yes, master. Angel Londo nodded and turned around to look at the scenery outside. At the same time, he was observing the surroundings. He had to protect his master's safety. With his master's power, there were very few people in the world who could hurt him. Soon, the white-clothed young man walked into the monastery on the cliff. The monastery was very simple, and he didn't see anyone on the way. He passed through one door after another and finally arrived at the monastery's church. There was only one nun, who was praying alone in front of the rainbow-colored window. The white-clothed young man didn't disturb this nun's prayer. Instead, he silently sat down on the bench on the left side. He put his hands on his forehead and prayed simply. Time slowly passed. Suddenly, the nun in the church called out softly, "What's the matter?" The white-clothed young man slowly opened his eyes. The nun continued to whisper, "I've been kneeling for too long, and my legs are numb. Can you come and help me? I can't stand up." Even though the white-clothed young man was a legend who fought in various small worlds all year round, he couldn't help but have a strange expression on his face. He shook his head and said indifferently, "Then you don't need to get up. Just sit there." How cruel! The white-clothed young man got straight to the point. "Maria, I was injured on the front line. The external injuries should be healed, but I suspect that there are still internal injuries on my body. I want you to take a look at them." The nun turned her head in surprise. It was the image of a young girl, but she had a proud figure that would make a mature woman sigh. The Virgin, a woman who gave birth to the Holy Son with her virginity. The residents of Maria City didn't know that the Holy Mother had been living in this simple monastery all this time, and she was alone. There was no way to go down the cliff, and there was no foothold to climb. It was like a cage. "You're injured?" The nun had a look of disbelief on her face. "It should be the work of the Eastern immortals." The white-clothed young man said indifferently, "Every time we fight with heaven, we always encounter some trouble." The nun shook her head and said, "Fighting is wrong. Isn't it good to sit down and eat buns, shake hands, and be good friends?" The white-clothed young man was silent. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "Only with enough willpower and the support of the world's origin, Father can go further on the path of origin. This is Father's wish." The nun rubbed her legs and slowly propped herself up. She gradually came to the front of the white-clothed youth. She reached out her hand and wiped the white-clothed youth's forehead. She smiled and said, "Among so many children, you are the most obedient, Mir." The white-clothed young man was expressionless. "Is there something wrong with my body?" "I haven't started yet," the nun said slowly. The white-clothed young man slowly exhaled and simply closed his eyes, allowing the nun's hand to touch his forehead. But at this moment, the white-clothed young man suddenly opened his eyes. His face instantly turned pale, and then he spat out another mouthful of golden blood. The nun dodged when the white-clothed young man moved. After spitting out the blood, the white-clothed young man said in a low voice, "My origin has been erased at least 30%. Meyer, who did you provoke?" The nun couldn't help but open her eyes wide. "To mess with you like this, you didn't go and convert someone's wife and daughter, right?" "How'd he know?" "That guy who called himself Taoist Luya, except for a strange secret weapon, was he that powerful?" The white-clothed young man took a deep breath and gradually calmed down the restless origin in his body. He asked with difficulty, "Maria, what's wrong with my body?" The nun smiled embarrassedly. I haven't finished yet." "Meyer, wait, I'll finish soon." The nun quickly said, "But will you still spit out blood? Remember to tell me first when you do. I only have this set of clothes. It'll be troublesome if it gets dirty. I don't want to wash clothes." "Don't worry." The white-clothed young man suppressed his voice and said, "Even if I spit out blood, I'll swallow it. I won't dirty your clothes. Holy Mother above. Meyer's really a good child. ##########PS. As usual.